Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 19th. It's a big day on the council docket, and we begin today with presentations and a proclamation recognizing the retirement of Kim Jones, Chief Executive Officer of Nonprofit Village. I will be doing this joint proclamation, which is being led by Councilmember Jawando, who will be joining us virtually momentarily. But if I could invite Ms. Jones to come forward, we're going to do this up front. All right, and if you guys can just cue me when Councilmember Jawando joins us virtually, that would be great. Well, good morning, everyone. It is truly an honor and privilege to have this tremendous opportunity. I've known Ms. Jones, just like so many of us in the audience and at home, for a number of years, going back to my time as the director of the Recreation Department, when she steadfastly advocated for additional programs and services in the Scotland community, but also was dedicated in recognizing the importance that nonprofits play in the ecosystem of public health, of service delivery, and the important role that nonprofits play in being able to expand and do an even better job sometimes than the county in meeting communities where they are in a manner in which is culturally appropriate. And she also uniquely recognizes the alliance and the partnership that is so critically important among and between nonprofit organizations. And so when Nonprofit Village was established, it was truly a dream come true for many of us in the sector, because it carried out in real time through bricks and mortar and in a real place, a time and space for us to be able to gather as a community and collaborate. And as we know, nonprofit organizations in Montgomery County come in all shapes and sizes and have different levels of infrastructure and administrative support. And through Kim's leadership, that of the board and of the visionaries that started Nonprofit Village, we were able to raise all boats. And so we can't thank her enough for her dedication and leadership, especially these last few years, when all of us have been exhausted and overwhelmed and disoriented. Kim has really remained strong and has been a mentor to many nonprofit executives, not just here in Montgomery County, but across our region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Jawando to make some comments. He is joining us virtually today because, of course, he is recovering from a bout with COVID. Fortunately, he has told us he has had mild symptoms. He looks great, so let's hope that he's feeling better too. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. Hopefully you can hear me. And good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kim. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person. Thankful for the technology and our great team at the council that enables me to be here virtually. I am doing better and mild symptoms, and appreciate the compliment, Councilmember Alvarez. So Kim, so happy for you. When I was so glad that we were able to, do this proclamation, and as I'm sure you'll hear, you've already heard from Councilmember Alvarez, and you'll hear from other colleagues and other speakers. You are a force, and a force for good. And as you embark on this next chapter of your life, it's only appropriate that we honor the incredible work that you've done as CEO of Nonprofit Village, helping support, as was mentioned, the great tapestry and infrastructure that supports our residents. And you are just as much a part of that as anybody. And Nonprofit Village has thrived under your leadership. And I'm going to highlight just a couple of accomplishments. You changed the trajectory of more than 1,500 charitable organizations over the last 10 years, 1,500. You've funded, and that's through a combination of philanthropic, corporate, and individual contributions. You've shifted your business model. We always say that nonprofits are businesses, and to a proven success method of one-on-one coaching and small group learning. And now you've built capacity and have served as a model for other folks who are seeking to build capacity. You're serving more than 200 organizations each year, and your membership has increased from 6 to more than 40 organizations. Oh, and by the way, revenue up 450%. Yeah, I wish, these are numbers that we should run a model here. There's so many more things. I see people clapping, so I'm going to pause and let them clap for you. There are certainly many more things we can highlight about your 10 years, but I just want to say personally, I just thank you for your tireless commitment, your sacrificial commitment. That's why I'm really actually feel two ways about this. I'm happy that you're doing something else. I'm sad for our community, but I'm happy for you personally because I know you've given a lot to this organization and to every organization that you've helped nurture and grow. But you have to take care of yourself as well. And I know you're not going far, and we love you and we're so thankful for you. So thank you. I'll turn it back to Councilmember Alvarez to moderate other colleagues and the speakers, and I'm going to stick around, of course, but just thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Jawando. And in a moment for the picture, we're going to ask all of the cheering audience to come for a picture with Ms. Jones, but I am going to jointly read the proclamation with Councilmember Jawando now, and then we will hear from Ms. Jones herself. So, Councilmember Jawando, do you have the proclamation in front of you?
I do.
Okay.
Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Whereas Kim Jones has been the CEO of Nonprofit Village since 2012, and during that time, she expanded their capacity by creating innovative programs that led to nonprofit growth in a collaborative environment for nonprofit members. And
whereas Ms. Jones raised the visibility of the nonprofit village and changed the business model to better serve small nonprofits, advocated for an inclusive and equitable sector, and created a board diversity program that is modeled by other organizations. And
whereas, in addition to her extensive accomplishments as CEO of Nonprofit Village, Ms. Jones founded and directed 2 nonprofits focused on international business and minority outreach, and she also has served as an ambassador for small nonprofit organizations. And
whereas her many awards and accolades include Maryland's Top 100 Women, the Community Builder Award for the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, the Distinguished Graduate Award from Leadership Montgomery, and the inaugural Girl Legacy Award from Community Bridges. And take us home, Councilmember Jawando.
Whereas Ms. Jones is a passionate leader who believes that sharing knowledge, resources, and best practices help make nonprofits sustainable. She leaves a legacy at Nonprofit Village that will last for years to come. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County hereby extends best wishes and heartfelt thanks to Ms. Kim Jones for her 10 years of outstanding service as CEO of Nonprofit Village. And be it further resolved that we share our deepest gratitude for the invaluable impact she has made throughout Montgomery County. Presented on this day, the 19th of May, in the year 2022, signed by myself and the Council President on behalf of all of our colleagues. Congratulations, Kim.
Yay. We're going to let her compose herself a little bit. I got emotional too, and we're going to now invite her to say some words.
Thank you so much. Whew. Thank you so much, Councilmember Alvarez, and all the council members. Councilmember Jawando, this is overwhelming. I realize now that long hours matter because it makes impact, and sometimes we have to do the things that are necessary in order to continue to make impact. There's a lot of people to thank. I'm not alone in this. First, my family is here. My husband, Kevin, my son, Brett, who watched me kind of do this, and now I see my son with his work, kind of staying up late at night, and I say, you shouldn't do that. And I realized, okay, I guess I was the model. Board members, Daniel Pera is here, Lori Edberg is here. I don't think there's any other board members, but my colleagues have been tremendous in this time over the last 10 years. My current colleague, Wen-Bin Lee, who is amazing and takes the load off of me a lot of times. And before her, I think a lot of you know Tom Colling, who was just incredible for a number of years. And I thought, I couldn't have had a better teammate, so thank you. Some of our tremendous consultants, Dr. Valentine, Louis Flax, are here, partners from MC EDC, Lyndon Zion. There's just so many people, and this isn't done in a vacuum. Capacity building is hard, and capacity building takes a lot of collaboration. So I appreciate all of the collaboration. I appreciate the fact that so many organizations are there with us to help do this work. And I was very proud to lead this. It was Jeffrey Slavin who brought me to the board of the Nonprofit Village when it was first established, and several years later invited me to apply for the position. And so I've kind of been stuck with the organization since you brought me in, Jeffrey. So thank you very much for allowing me to do this work. Some of it is a little black girl magic, I think, sometimes. The sisterhood that has been around me has been instrumental in the work that I do, and it every day demonstrates to me that there are people there to support you, to help you in knowing that the work that you do can be tremendously powerful, and you can even do so much more with the support of that sisterhood and with a little less time spent on nonsense. So sometimes I have to get the nonsense out of the way. But I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I think, Dorothy, I can announce. So I'm not going far. I am actually going to be joining the team at Montgomery College at the Nonprofit Institute. So I will be doing capacity building still, and doing it from a different angle, from an academic angle. And I'm very proud to join that team. And we've partnered with the college over the years so many times, and now I'll just be on the other side. So I'll be right down the street. And I'm very excited about that opportunity. But I appreciate the chance to do this work, to get to know everybody, and I couldn't have asked for better council members over these years, because it was such, I was saying to Councilmember Rice, this was such an easy discussion to have about what we do, and they always ask the right questions. Can you show us the evidence of the work that you've done? And that's why we're so data oriented. But thank you for all the support over the years, and I'll look forward to continuing to work with you just in a different capacity. Thank you again.
Great job. Why doesn't everybody come forward for the picture? Colleagues, if you want to come down.
And I hope they'll put me on the big screen so I can be in the back there. Hey, Quinn.
Hot shot. Come on over.
I'm just going to keep smiling.
You dropped it.
Yes, somebody just dropped a card.
see you. Yeah, Gary's waiting.
Yeah, love you, Kim. Take care.
All right, we're a little ahead of schedule, so we will start back up again in about 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, 10 minutes. All right, can we get a countdown?
We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, everyone. I am Montgomery County Council President Gabriel Albornoz, and today is Thursday, May 19th. It's a big day on the council calendar as we go through straw votes on the budget and CIP for FY23 and beyond. But we begin today on the sad note of the passing of former Montgomery County Executive Sidney Kramer. County Executive Kramer's life of public service was nothing short of extraordinary, having served with distinction both at the state level and at the county level, and continuing his work even after elected to office, and by extension, his remarkable family continuing a legacy of public service. His life was a life well lived, it was a life respected, and you can sense his commitment to our community and his contributions pretty much everywhere you look here in our community. So we would like, on behalf of this body and our entire community, to express our deepest condolences to Senator Kramer, Secretary Kramer, and the entire Kramer family. And I ask now that we issue a moment of silence as we reflect on the incredible public service of County Executive Kramer. Thank you. We now move on to our general business. Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda changes or announcements?
Yes. Good morning, Council President, Council Vice President, Council members. We have a few announcements. First, the public hearing for the supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY22 operating budget, Department of Transportation, $12,472,739, and the Department of General Services, $3,146,130,000 for snow removal, wind, and rainstorm cleanup. The public hearing will be held at 9:30 in the morning rather than 1:30 as previously reported, and that will be on Thursday, May 26th. We have a correction to the current agenda. Item number 7, there will be an introduction action resolution to approve WSSC water system development charge. There's a correction to item number 8. For the action resolution to approve executive regulation, it's 6-22, systems benefit charges, residential waste estimates. We have deleted item number 10. Of the resolution to approve executive regulation number 12-22T, amendment to the Montgomery County Personnel Regulation, temporary extension of the sunset date of MCPR. We have deleted item 15F, an introduction of the FY23 system development charge, as that will be addressed in another item, pardon me. We have added item number 21.5. The council will be sitting as the Board of Health this afternoon, and we have changed the time of the work session for the FY23 operating budget and FY23 to 28 CIP. The time has changed to 2:35, and the council did not receive any petitions this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The clerk has circulated the minutes from our April 5th, 2022 session, as well as the closed session from the minutes of May 3rd. Are there any changes to those minutes? Hearing none, those are approved. We now move on to item number 2, which is an action. And this is a resolution to appoint Chief Digital Officer, Mr. Kenneth Lennon, to this important position. Can I get a motion to accept the appointment of Mr. Lennon? Moved by Council Vice President Glass, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. And I should have noted up front that, of course, we read and heard that Councilmember Jawando is recovering from COVID. The great news is he has just had mild symptoms, and as you can see from the screen, is looking good, but obviously is joining us virtually today for that reason. So we now move on to the third item on the agenda, which is an action and resolution to appoint Montgomery County Planning Board candidate, Ms. Carol Rubin, who is in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I get a motion to accept the appointment of Ms. Rubin? Moved by Councilmember Navarro, seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And you want to get a pic, Carol? You want to get a picture? No? Okay. Yeah, she's already been through this before. So that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. All right. The fourth item on the agenda is also an action. This is a resolution to approve the FY23 transportation fees, charges, and fares. T&E recommends approval. All those in favor of the T&E recommended approval, please raise your hands. Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, the T&E committee recommended actually not having fares in FY 23, but the council's arrived, I understand, at a different position. So my understanding is that the bus fares will go into effect in July. That is proposed by the executive.
Got it. My fault. So we need a motion to recognize that change. Can I get a motion to recognize that change? Moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Hucker. All those in favor of that change in resolution, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. All right, let me make sure I got this one right. We have a resolution to establish the FY23 solid waste service charges. T&E recommends approval with amendments. Mr. Levchenko, did you want to add anything to this comment?
Actually, the solid waste service charges were recommended by the T&E committee as recommended by the county executive. There were some discussion at the committee, but no changes to the solid waste charges.
Chair Hucker, did you want to add anything?
No, I think I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a T&E recommendation to recommend the county executive's recommendations. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. Next, we will move on to item number 6, which is a resolution to establish the FY23 water quality protection charge. Mr. Levchenko, any comments on this?
Committee recommended approval as recommended by the executive.
So can we get, all those in favor of the committee recommendation, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual as well. Which takes us on to item number 7. I would like to ask for a motion to suspend Rule 7C so we may take action upon a resolution on the same date as introduced. Moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That is also unanimous among all those present and virtual. So with that, I turn it over to the chair of the T&E committee and Mr. Levchenko to discuss this item.
Yes, the T&E committee first discussed this as part of the WSSC water operating budget. It was later discussed at the bi-county meeting with our Prince George's County Council colleagues. And at that meeting, they concurred with the FY23 system development charge as proposed by WSSC Water, which assumes no changes in the rates for this year, however, an increase in the maximum allowable rate if it's chosen to be increased in the future. So this resolution is consistent with that initial joint action last week. We would have introduced it sooner and avoided the suspension of rules, but the Tuesday council meeting was canceled. So instead of delaying this action, we chose to see if we could move forward with introduction action the same day today.
Chair Hucker, did you want to add anything?
I believe Mr. Levchenko covered it thoroughly. Thank you.
Great. So can I get a motion to pass this resolution as recommended by the T&E committee?
So moved.
Seconded. Moved by Councilmember Hucker, seconded by Council Vice President Glass. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. We move on to item number 8. This is a resolution to approve Executive Regulation 622, Systems Benefit Charges, Residential Waste Estimates. Mr. Levchenko, anything to add on this?
This regulation is needed to update the estimated generation of tons of waste by both single-family residential and multifamily residential properties. And it's a major assumption used in developing the tonnages and then the budget for the Department of Environmental Protection's Recycling and Resource Management Division. And the executive's recommended budget for that division assumed these rates, as did the committee's recommendation and the council's preliminary action last week on the DEP budget. So this regulation is consistent with all of the council's actions to date, and council staff recommends approval.
Thank you. I don't see any questions or comments from colleagues. Can I get a motion to accept the staff recommendation? Moved by Councilmember Navarro, seconded by Councilmember Rice. No discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. That moves us on to item number 9, which is a resolution to approve FY23 annual transportation plan grant application, request for operating and capital funding assistance. Dr. Orland?
Yes, this is a grant application that DOT makes to MTA every year for state funding for transit as well as for federal funding that flows through the state. And it's for certain bus services, which we've always received this kind of money. So this is, again, just a grant application. And this is coming directly to council. So you don't have it didn't go before the committee because it's relatively pro forma.
Got it. So the staff recommends approval. Great. And I see Director Conklin in the audience. Thank you for coming, Director Conklin. Can I get a motion to accept the staff recommendation? Moved by Councilmember Hucker, seconded by Councilmember Katz. No discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Orland and Mr. Levchenko. That takes us on to the work sessions for the FY23 operating budget and FY23 through 28 CIP. We begin with a continuation of a discussion that we had last week on community grants, non-departmental accounts. I want to thank the team for their work on this and their recommendations. There are 3 recommendations being made by staff. The first is to strategically align all community grants into the base budgets of county departments and mission-related county agencies. The second is to recommend scheduling an oversight session with the Office of Grants Management to review proposed grant application processes and mechanics to disperse grant funds. And the third is to review the community grants category with the council's HHS committee, which we will work on scheduling as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Ms. Chen, for your work on this. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope.
Great. Thank you. Can I get a motion to, sorry about that, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much. So in terms of the follow-ups, I know that the last time we had when we reviewed this, the recommendation was to actually go ahead and move particular grants into the base budget. And so what we are going to approve is saying that they're going to work on that. Is that right? Okay. So I just want to state for the record that, we've had this conversation before where we've said you need to work on that. And so to my colleagues, obviously I get it. I've been here long enough. But I hope that there will actually be some movement, because if not, this is what will happen next year, same exact thing. I know that this is not easy. I know it's controversial. But I think that recognizing the changes in Montgomery County, recognizing that there are always going to be limited resources, and also recognizing the very hard work of the council in collaboration with the administration to move towards this office, is actually to make sure that we are aligning in the most efficient way the grant making, and making room also for those organizations that are cutting edge or are more adapt to meet the needs of our constituents. What we don't want is just to have certain organizations capturing all the resources and not allowing others to grow. And so, so I just wanted to put that in the record because I think that, to say that, okay, we're going to come back, et cetera, to me is just kind of punting, and hope that, again, this does get addressed. Same thing with the review by the HHS committee. I think that we also need to make sure that there aren't other grants that might fall into that category that are outside of the HHS committee purview. This is something we also discussed when we were having conversations about the Office and Grants Management. So that's something that I just wanted to reflect on the record moving forward. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Chen, and thank you so much for all your work as well. And congratulations to your daughter.
Absolutely noted, and I couldn't agree more with everything you just said, and we'll make sure that happens. All right, we have a staff recommendation. Can I get a motion to accept, moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Reamer? All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present in virtual. Thank you very much. All right, that moves us on to item number 12, which is a discussion regarding the Montgomery County Green Bank NDA. I see that Mr. Smith is here, but I will turn it over to, this crosses over, I believe, into both GO as well as Fed. And so I turn it over to the chairs of those both committees if they'd like to make some opening comments.
It was T&E and Go.
T&E, sorry. Didn't get any sleep last night.
Madam Chair, should I go first?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Council President. In a joint session on May 5th, the GO and the T&E committees took up the Green Bank NDA. So this is a new program. The NDA was created in FY23 after the council adopted the Montgomery County Green Buildings Now Act, which I sponsored with Councilmember Friedson and so many of my colleagues co-sponsored. I want to thank all my colleagues for unanimously passing the bill, which is 4421. The bill dedicated 10% of the county energy tax revenues, almost $20 million each year, to the Montgomery County Green Bank. They will use our fund to leverage up to $100 million each year to retrofit our biggest greenhouse gas emitters, biggest sources of carbon pollution in the county, which is the building sector, both commercial and multifamily residential. This NDA and the bill will complement the recently passed BEPS legislation and will really help us meet our climate goals by addressing our biggest source of carbon pollution. The Green Bank is really an amazing and underutilized tool that we've had for several years. They've never had these kind of capital assets to take advantage of, and they are very excited about it, as are so many members of the business community and others that are eager to make those investments in our old inefficient buildings, which is terrific. So the Joint Committee unanimously recommended approval of the NDA, Mr. President, and I'll pass it back to you and Chair Navarro if she wants to add anything.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Friedson would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just am really excited about this. I'm glad that it was mistakenly left off so we can highlight it because it is a game changer for this council's commitment to addressing climate. And really proud to have worked with you, Councilmember Hucker, and all colleagues in moving this forward. When we raise the bar for our climate targets, we have to provide the ladder so that residents and businesses can actually reach it. That's what this does. It's going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year in perpetuity to actually be able to follow through on what our ambitious climate targets have been and provide an opportunity for our residents and our businesses to actually do what many want to do but can't do because they lack the adequate access to the capital that they need to make the types of improvements that our older buildings require in order to move this forward. So pleased to join you, pleased to put this commitment where our resolutions have been in the past, and I think it's another example of how this council has not just talked about moving the needle on issues, but has actually made significant financial commitments to actually following through on them. So thank you for that and appreciate it. Look forward to pushing this forward in this budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, was there anything you wanted to add?
Nope. The committee's recommendations before the council.
Great. All right, we have a joint committee recommendation. All those in favor of the joint committee recommendation, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. Congratulations. Okay, that takes us on to item number 13, which is the capital budget wrap-up and CIP reconciliation. I just want to express my deepest appreciation to the central staff who worked very hard to accommodate and make the adjustments necessary that get before us here this morning, and have just been so impressed with the dedication and commitment in trying to address the myriad of needs that we have in our community and the myriads of perspectives that we have on this body, all with the same goal of trying to move our community forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to this team to walk us through this packet, and then we will be taking a straw vote after that. And colleagues, and to those at home, we will take up items 13 and 14. Following those two straw votes, my colleagues and I will make comments regarding our perspectives with regards to this operating budget and CIP. I will speak, then followed by the Council Vice President, and then we will go in order by which we vote. So for everybody at home and to colleagues. With that, I turn it over to the team.
Thank you. And this is very much a team effort. I mean, you see three of us at the table today, but we also have a lot of thank yous to OMB staff, Mary Beck and Veronica Jawa in particular, as well as a number of other staff in OMB who provided a lot of support to us as we were working through this very complex puzzle that we have to put together each year to reconcile the CIP. I'm going to talk about some of the macro issues and revenues, and then Essie and Glenn will get into some of the expenditure changes that staff developed to get us to this reconciliation point. First, I did want to note the starting gap at the conclusion of the council's deliberations last week. We had about $156 million 6-year gap in bonds and tax-supported current revenue in total that we had to deal with. We also have to balance those numbers by fiscal year, and those numbers were particularly challenging in the middle and later years of the CIP. So we have a 6-year problem where we had to pull dollars out of the CIP, but we also have to move them around within the CIP to balance those years. So that becomes a complex pushing and pulling of numbers. So that's part of the challenge here. And what this gap assumes, I think, is important to summarize as well. So going back to the council's early actions, in early February, the council reiterated its support for its approved spending affordability guidelines. This was the $1.68 billion 6-year GO bonds plan for issue total. It's important to note that the executive, in his recommendation, came in with an assumed level for spending affordability that was $70 million higher in his recommended budget. So his numbers had $70 million more in resources, if you will, particularly in the last 4 years of the CIP. But the council's spending affordability guidelines, which it reiterated its support for in February, did not have that additional cushion in it. So that was one issue going forward. The PAYGO levels were a little bit different in that regard. The county executive actually recommended a slightly higher percentage of PAYGO than the policy level required, or the policy level would push us to. The policy level was 10% of the bonds planned for issue. The executive's number was at about 10.8%, and with the council's SAG levels that I mentioned being below the executives, we're actually a little bit higher than that. So very healthy PAYGO levels within the CIP, and that helped make this gap what it is, or it would have been higher without that. Put it that way, another $10 or $12 million in gap if we hadn't stayed with that PAYGO level. The other thing that happened during this process, more in the March-April timeframe, the executive came over with CIP amendments and revisions based on some additional recordation tax and impact tax revenue that he was projecting for FYs 23 through 28. That was about $48.4 million. However, he did include a number of projects to use those resources, and the council has generally been supportive of those projects. So while that $48.4 million did add to revenues, it didn't contribute significantly to reducing the gap that we were experiencing. So that $156 million reflects those increased revenues. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that this gap includes, and the gap would be significantly higher without, is all the state aid that we're assuming. And we really put that into two buckets. One is the state aid for school construction. Both council and executive staff have spent a lot of time over the last year working with MCPS and working with the state to try to move issues forward at the state level, both with legislation and with regulation and policy, to try to increase the amount of state aid we get per project. Historically, we've been getting about 20 cents on the dollar for our school construction projects, and with the cost increases we're seeing and with all the needs we have, that was becoming increasingly challenging for us to keep up. A couple of years ago, the state did approve additional funding through Built to Learn, and fortunately, there's also some additional flexibility within that, and we get a significantly higher rate of return, if you will, on that. And that was built into the executive's recommendation, and of course, it's carried forward in staff's reconciliation. Once again, without those numbers, without that additional school state aid, this gap would have been much higher than that, and we would have had far less that we could even begin to contemplate to put in the CIP. On the non-school state aid arena, we had a number of successes at the state in other areas, such as in transportation and housing and others. So that state aid, which came in, which was identified fairly late, has been recognized in this reconciliation as well. So in some cases, that was able to reduce some of our local needs, but in other areas, it was additional projects or commitments to projects that we wanted to reflect in the CIP, and that's enabled us to provide that funding. The other thing I want to note here within this gap is because of the significant reductions assumed in the executive's recommended CIP for the MCPS school construction budget, the council had to deal with about $100 million in non-recommended reductions for MCPS. And as a result, the E&C committee asked MCPS to provide a scenario that would get its numbers closer in line to the executive's recommendation, which MCPS did. The committee reviewed that, and the council as well preliminarily reviewed that, and those non-recommended reductions and adjustments, there were some additions included in that as well, are assumed in this gap that we were just talking about. Otherwise, this gap would be about $68 million higher in the 6 years. So the work that MCPS did to bring their numbers down, once again, gets us to a position where we have more flexibility at reconciliation. And we'll talk more about those expenditure changes and other impacts on MCPS in the discussion of the expenditure reductions. In general, we do have some, dealing with significant cost increases, construction cost increases in the CIP, both in schools and elsewhere, and we expect that uncertainty to continue. So that's also flavored this reconciliation in terms of wanting to make sure that we have adequate set-asides for future spending that we expect to come for new projects and for construction cost increase for current projects. Also, I did want to note that getting back to the spending affordability guidelines, it is unusual, and Dr. Orlin has the 30 years of experience with reconciliation to note this, that it is unusual for the executive to send over a budget assuming different spending affordability guidelines than what the council approved. So that provided a challenge to us this year as well. So that's sort of where we were with the gap. Now, in terms of reconciliation, we did have a couple of resource changes that helped us with the start of reconciliation. First, I had mentioned the FY23 through 28 recordation and impact tax increases that the executive had identified earlier this spring. Staff also looked at the FY22 experience this year we had the through April numbers for the impact taxes and recordation taxes, and we trended those out, assuming a consistent level of continued revenue in May and June. And doing that exercise identified a significant surplus in FY22 of about $48.6 million. So that's revenue that is available for consideration for both FY22, but also looking forward in FY23 through 28. However, we also have a lot of uncertainty going forward. I mentioned the construction cost increases. Also, OMB and Finance are reviewing an issue related to collection and accounting of past non-county resources in completed projects or ongoing projects. So there's a lot of concern going forward and a lot of uncertainty. So as a result, this reconciliation assumes using about 36.6 million of that 48 to help solve our 6-year problem going forward in FY23 through 28. Also, another area that helped us marginally is in the state aid for school construction. As part of that calculation this year, for the first time in looking at school construction, OMB did basically a micro review. Rather than just assuming what we would get generally each year or hope to get each year, we looked at every project in both OMB, NCPS, and council staff, and identified what we felt were reasonable assumptions to make by project. And based on that, you come up with significant increases in state aid based on what I talked about earlier, about a lot of the improvements we're seeing, especially in the Build to Learn dollars. But OMB also recognized some uncertainty going forward, especially given our history with state aid, and that we do tend to get some reductions in the end. And so they did identify a cushion of about $30 million that they recommended that's recommended in the executive CIP to reduce that number slightly. For reconciliation, staff is assuming about half of that cushion. These are estimates. We don't really know, but we felt a cushion is reasonable, and we felt at this point by doing half of the cushion, that freed up about $15 million that helps us once again solve this puzzle for FY23 through 28. Also, we are assuming, as I mentioned earlier, set-asides pretty close to what the executive recommended, maybe slightly higher, that are in about a 9 to 9.5% range of expenditures for bonds and PAYGO, and that's another area where we feel we're keeping those at a level we feel can also accommodate some uncertainty going forward. So with all of those assumptions, and one other assumption we're making with regard to the expenditures, I mentioned the spending affordability guidelines earlier. Staff is not suggesting any change in the approved guidelines, but we are recommending shifting some of the numbers in the out years of the guidelines from 1 year to another, assuming the same total across the 6 years, the $1.68 billion, which is the approved SAG level, but assuming actually less spending in the first 2 years of the CIP and slightly higher in the last 4 years, for a level spending of $280 million a year, as opposed to a slightly declining level of spending, which was assumed in the executive's recommended CIP, albeit at the higher level, and what was presented to the council last fall as one scenario for how you would use that $1.68 billion. So once again, shifting the dollars around a little bit helps solve some of the year-to-year puzzle, while still maintaining the approved spending affordability and not requiring the council to exceed its spending affordability guidelines. So this is something that some flexibility we have within the approved guidelines. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Essie and Glenn to talk about the expenditure changes going forward and the reductions and deferrals we're looking at.
Thank you. So as we begin to go through the expenditure changes that are necessary in order to reconcile the FY23 to 28 CIP, I do want to highlight some of the approach that we worked to take. Council staff certainly did work first and foremost to focus on incremental reductions and deferrals, and to the extent possible to maintain the priorities that have been identified throughout the Council's review, to maintain those project priorities and keep them within the CIP. So what you will see is that by and large projects do remain in the CIP, although again, as we've discussed, not necessarily on the original or proposed schedules. In looking at the systemic infrastructure level of effort projects, here again, Council staff worked to preserve some increase where it had been requested or proposed, even if the full level of the increase could not be achieved. And so again, in levels of effort projects, what you will see is, to the extent possible, maintaining an increase over the approved level or over the prior year spending, again, perhaps not to quite the same level. And do just want to reiterate that the non-recommended reductions submitted by MCPS and by the college are reflected in the reconciliation scenario that we're bringing to you today. We certainly appreciate the partnership and collaboration with our colleagues at those agencies, understanding that this is a difficult exercise for everyone. Again, appreciate their professional and collegial support. So we do recommend to you, Council staff does recommend to you the expenditure changes and adjustments to the projects that are outlined in the table in your packet, and we will review those briefly for you. If the revised spending affordability targets for 23 to 28, as we discussed, all of the resource actions and all of the actions noted in the table below are adopted, your FY 23 to 28 CIP will be reconciled. In addition, we do want to emphasize that we were also careful and cautious to maintain a healthy set-aside in the 6 years to be sure that there is funding for unforeseen changes, construction cost increases, as we've discussed, other potential emergencies, and we have worked to maintain that 9 to 10% level, percent of expenditures level that is typical and recommended in your set-aside for the 6 years. Beginning with the schools, in addition to, again, the non-recommended reductions, the actions that we are bringing for you today are a one-year additional delay to Magruder High School and a one-year additional delay to Wooten High School. I would just highlight briefly that while these are certainly important facility projects, again, we did maintain the projects themselves, and these are schools that are not experiencing some of the capacity pressures that other schools in the CIP, particularly at the high school level, are experiencing, and that is why we recommended them for you today. I'm going to pause and hand it off to Dr. Orland to go through transportation.
Thanks, Ceci. The largest single lift in the CIP in terms of an individual project was the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel. The council had approved funding for it in fiscal years 25, 26, and 27 in the last CIP. The executive had recommended a four-plus year deferral of that, so there would not any money in the 6-year period for that. And so the best we were able to do, frankly, was to be able to put it back in FY 26, 27, and 28, which represents a 1.5 year delay from what the approved schedule is. So the construction would start in early 2026 and could be completed in late spring of 2028. If the project had been able to stay on schedule somehow, it would have matched exactly the currently planned opening for the Purple Line, but unfortunately we couldn't afford to do that. I think Essie may have mentioned that the biggest problems we have with the CIP, frankly, were fiscal years 25, 26, and 27, and being able to keep all this money in that period was just frankly not possible and have a reconciled CIP. The other projects, and then there's several of them, Bowie Mill Road Bikeway, the executive had recommended keeping it on its current schedule. Late in the CIP season this winter, we received a letter from the Greater Albany Civic Association asking that it be accelerated by a year. The council tentatively agreed with this, but this puts it back on the approved schedule. So the project is not delayed, but it's also not accelerated. The Goldsboro Road Sidewalk and Bikeway would be deferred 1 year for what's in the approved CIP. Summit Avenue Extended is a new project for construction. The CIP, it's been facility planning for a number of years. This is in Kensington. The town of Kensington and Councilmember Friedson had recommended that the design be started in FY 25, recognizing that it was a tough CIP. They didn't put it in the very front of the CIP. However, this requires us to delay it by 2 years. So the design will start in FY 27 and be completed in FY 31. A lot of discussion about the pedestrian safety program that includes a lot of initiatives, but the main one that was talked about in committee at the council was funding for building sidewalk or reducing sidewalk gaps in the vicinity of schools. The executive had actually added some money in his recommendation initially. Councilmember Jawando had recommended adding $300,000 each year on top of that, which the committee and the council agreed to, and on top of that, the committee and the council wanted to add an additional $500,000 starting in FY24 through FY28. So $300,000 more in FY23 compared to the executive, and $800,000 a year after that. What this reconciliation does is keeps the $300,000 increase in 23, keeps the $800,000 increase in 24, but the increases in 25 through 28 is $400,000, not $800,000. The US 29 pedestrian bike improvements. This is a new project to build bikeways and sidewalks within the first mile, last mile of flash stations along US 29. We received some money from the General Assembly to actually fund this program in the first 2 years. In the latter years, FY25 through 28, the executive had recommended, I believe it was $1 million a year. Just double checking my notes. No, actually recommended, yes, $1 million a year in the first 2 years. I'm sorry, let me take this back. FY25 and 26 added $1 million a year and added $2 million a year in FY27 and 28. This reduces that by half, so it'd be $500,000 more per year in 25 and 26, and $1 million a year in 27 and 28. The bicycle pedestrian priority area project, the general project, which covers several different areas of the county. One of the sub-projects is a block of money for what is yet unidentified projects in the Glenmont area. That money is being recommended for a deferral by 1 year. The money is still there, but it's a 1 year deferral. In the bicycle pedestrian priority area project for Wheaton, there is one project near the back part of the 6 year period to build a shared use path along the ring road. I did the ring road around Wheaton Plaza, this delays that by 1 year. There's a relatively new project, the bus priority improvements minor project, which had been recommended for I believe $500,000 a year in FY23 and 24, and $1 million a year each year subsequently. This keeps the level for all 6 years at $500,000. The sidewalk and curb replacement project, there have been proposed recommended increases in expenditures in the last 4 years of the CIP. This keeps an increase, but the increase is not as much as what the council approved to date. And similar type of thing for resurfacing residential rural roads. There was a proposed increase in the last 3 years of the CIP. This reduces the size of that increase in those 3 years. In both those cases, the next council will have the opportunity in the next CIP to raise those numbers up, because we will not have reached those years yet. The traffic signals program, the executive recommended adding $500,000 a year starting in FY25. This reduces that increase by half, so it's $250,000 more per year. The bridge renovation program, the executive had recommended adding $3 million in the front end of the CIP, 23 and 24, $1.5 million each in 23 and in 24. This defers $1 million of it from 23 to 24. So instead of being $1.5 million, it's $500,000, $2.5 million. The facility planning pedestrian bikes. There's a couple things happen here. One is the Goshen Road South pedestrian bike project, which the council identified it wanted to go forward with planning in FY27 and 28. This defers the start of it to FY28, so it's a deferral of 1 year. Also, within that project, the proposal that Mr. Kramer had put forward initially for responding to the WABA proposal, part of that proposal was to put funds in for planning of 29 bikeways, which were in equity emphasis areas, which were not yet programmed. This defers the start of that from 23 to 25 and reduces the funding so much, but there's still funding in there for that. The facility planning mass transit project, there are a couple of small studies that were recommended by the executive, one for a Hill and Dale bus layover and one for the Metropolitan Grove Park and Ride, and those have been deferred by 1 year. And finally, in facility planning roads, there were two studies, one for the Maryland 355 bypass in Clarksburg and one for the Long Branch Master Plan connections. The start of those studies would be deferred by 2 years. And I believe that are all of the DOT-related changes. So back to Essie.
Thank you. And I'll just highlight briefly a couple of the other adjustments that are also listed in your table for other departments and agencies. There is a 6-month delay in the completion of the Clarksburg Library. Again, those funds are maintained within the CIP. There is also a reduction of GO bonds in the Parks Legacy Open Space project. However, there are still funds in that project and in other projects that can support parks acquisition. And then we've adjusted expenditures in some projects, notably the White Oak Science Gateway and the Criminal Justice Center. But I do want to emphasize that the funding for the Criminal Justice Center is maintained to start that project on time, so that will allow us to apply for state aid as well as to complete design in a timely manner. And there are other technical adjustments that are listed for the record in your packet. And again, the package of adjustments that we presented to you and that's listed in the packet is our recommendation to reconcile the 23 to 28 CIP.
Great. Let me just echo some comments made by Mr. Levchenko at the beginning in thanking our colleagues in OMB, Ms. Bryant, Ms. Beck, the entire team for working collaboratively to get us to the point we are right now. We have a couple colleagues who'd like to speak. I will begin with the chair of our Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, Councilmember Navarro, followed by Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absolutely want to echo my appreciation. This is a very difficult process every single year. And Dr. Orlin, I always feel confident when I know that you're in the mix, because this combination with Mr. Levchenko and now Ms. McGuire is just a top level combination in terms of understanding all of these different moving pieces. And but I do want to say a few things about just the macro picture. It is so important to recognize, and this is something, Dr. Orlin, that I remember very clearly when you began to talk to us about our debt service and what it was going to take to really, shift the trajectory here. That was so significant because, as we all know, every dollar that is included in that debt service, that is money that we don't have available for our operating budget and to really, address and fund important priorities. I was asking Mr. Smith, who always staffs our GO committee very ably. I believe that the estimated total debt service is about $3.5 billion, just total. And since FY17, so that was the last year of the previous council, up until now, we have reduced that by 10%. And that is quite significant because as we heard all of you describe all of the projects, it's not easy, right? The temptation is to just move full speed ahead all the time. But it is important that we do actually balance that. And when we talk about the spending affordability guidelines, and I know, I kept hearing that over and over again, it's not about need, it's about affordability. I just think it is going to be very important for this body moving forward to make sure that whoever is, county executive actually does respect this process, because imagine it makes the job even harder if we are adopting certain spending affordability guidelines and somehow that is not, we have to be really working from the same sheet of paper. So I did want to point all of that out. I think that, there are, as you mentioned, a lot of different variables out there, some opportunities hopefully coming down from the federal government still that we are all tracking. I think the work of our General Assembly has been outstanding in taking advantage of some state dollars and increasing that. And also at some point, this important deliberation that I know Council Member Rice is chair of the Education and Culture Committee, all these conversations that we have had about the future of the templates of what a school building should look like, what a library should look like, et cetera. How can we be innovative? Because we know dollars are limited, but also we have limitations with space, but we always have really good innovators out there. And so that combination, I think, will serve us well. And so with that, I just truly want to thank you. I think this is an important CIP budget. There will be other opportunities, as I said, in the future to tweak some things. But overall, I think this has served us well. And hopefully, again, we'll continue to be very disciplined about our debt service because it is very serious. The number of, Councilmember Katz always says, how it is larger than some of our own departments, and that really cannot be sustained. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair Navarro. And let me echo your comments with regards to the General Assembly and our delegation. We've made those comments publicly before, but bears worth repeating. This was made a lot easier, frankly, thanks to those investments and that support. I now turn it over to the Chair of our Education and Culture Committee, Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And we owe a debt of gratitude to the state who has come through. We've been working on this for a long time in terms of the state stepping up to really get us to where we need to be in terms of a contribution that could help us to allay some of the forward funding that we've made on so many of these projects that we knew were so important to our community. You know, Councilmember Hucker knows this all too well because this was the same hamster wheel that we continued on in terms of asking. And we finally got this. But I want folks to understand that we're just at the beginning of where this infusion of additional state aid is coming in. And so it's going to take a while for us to catch up. And so what Councilmember Navarro said is spot on. It's one of those where we still have to be incredibly diligent in terms of managing as we transition to a phase where we now have the state really actually coming in with something that's more commensurate with the responsibility that they have to ensure that these very important projects across the state, especially when it comes to our school buildings, are there. And we've done our part. We've done our part when it comes to shelling out buildings. I'll never forget the conversation we had in an Education and Culture Committee meeting. Back then it was the Education Committee. And I was talking with one of the school reps and I said, I don't understand why it is that we're not doing things differently to prepare for the future. Well, now that's a standard practice. There are so many things that have changed in just this short tenure of 12 years on the council that are fundamentally shifted how we're more responsible with taxpayer dollars. And so I hope that people hear that and see that out of this budget, while there are important projects that we know are not able to be funded, there are some great projects that are there, and we have to be more stringent with these very, very compressed dollars that we have to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves when it comes to debt service. And so I know that some folks in the community will be disappointed about seeing some of the delays for some of these projects. But I also want to remind folks that as council members return, there are options that are on the table to increase revenue, recognizing the great shift in terms of the real estate market. I know that Councilmember Jawando, that is on the line, has certainly put forth, as well as many others, some proposals out there. So I certainly look to this next council to certainly come up with a way in which we can continue on our side to address many of the challenges that we face in terms of ensuring that the revenue is there to help support these very important projects. But lastly, just want to thank the Dream Team. You guys are amazing because we trust in you to be able to help us to figure out how all the pieces fall. We trust in you to understand where we are in terms of our priorities, and then trust in you to be able to try and make it all work, which is incredibly difficult. And so I do also want to echo the thanks for you for your commitment and your great work in getting us to a terrific place. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you so much. Just a couple quick comments. I'll talk about individual projects when we all talk about that after. But first of all, I want to start with the Dream Team. We were talking about it earlier this week. This team approach, I think, was really great and worked really well. It was not an easy process, but I think I was personally reassured, and I felt the process worked really well. And so I hope that we continue that, and just kudos to the three of you, but also to Ms. Michelson and the rest of the team. I think this team approach has worked well in general, but particularly with the capital budget, with all the moving parts and the different iterations and all of us seeing what we could move in our individual priority areas. It really made it better. I think this was the best process that I have seen in my 4 years here. So I just wanted to thank you for that. Understanding it's not a dream for everybody, and we couldn't fund everything, and there are some real challenges here. But despite those challenges, I think the process worked well, and the team approach was a really good thing. I did want to acknowledge our state partners as well, in particular having the capital budget chair, Senator Zucker, and having our delegation chair, Mark Corman, really provided a lot of smoothing out of some of the pain that would have been experienced but for that significant support, particularly when it comes to transportation and schools, some of our most important priorities in the county. And then I just wanted to close, reducing the debt by 10% is no small feat. And that takes a commitment. And in fact, it's budgets like these where it's hardest when there is revenue, when things are going well. It's a lot easier to make tough choices when things are bad. It's a lot harder to make tough choices when things are seemingly quite good. And I just wanted to acknowledge colleagues. I wanted to acknowledge the participation between the executive and the council staffs for all of the hard work. But it's not easy to do this, and I think it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of restraint, a lot of discipline. And there's a lot of pressure, but I just think that we deserve calling that out. And I just wanted to echo the leadership, or appreciate the leadership, and echo the comments of Chair Navarro for all of your work on this. And I do very much hope that we can continue that legacy as we move forward, because we've seen the benefits of what we've been able to do, and it's going to allow us to be able to afford the school commitments and the transportation priorities that we have moving forward, which aren't getting less, they're getting more. As we move forward. So thank you to colleagues, and I really appreciate that. And thank you in particular to staff. I know you've been working tirelessly to try to figure out the moving parts here.
Thank you. And I'll just note, did get some really positive feedback from our delegation that the county's priorities were very clear, which helped them maneuver their way through the General Assembly session this year. So whatever process we followed this year, let's replicate that moving forward. So thank you all. All right, colleagues, we have a staff recommendation. These are, of course, straw votes, but we have a staff recommendation for the CIP reconciliation. Can I get a motion to approve that staff recommendation? Moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Council Vice President Glass. Don't see any other discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that straw vote is unanimous among all those present and virtual. Thank you all very much. That takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion and review of item number 14, which is the operating budget, FY23 operating budget wrap-up and reconciliation. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Howard, and thank you, Ms. Michelson. I will turn it over to you.
Great. I want to echo your compliments to our dream team on the CIP. But I also want to introduce you to our next dream team, who I know you're well aware of. We have been going through the budget on a team approach. We have several staff members on the CIP team and on the operating budget team. You saw the leadership before you. On the CIP team, on the operating budget, it is Mr. Howard and Mr. Smith, who did an amazing job getting us to this point today. And I'm very grateful for their leadership with the rest of the team's effort on this. For the operating budget reconciliation, one of our primary concerns was the vote that the council took early on to say that you did not want to pull money from the OPEB trust. And that became something that we were very much focused on. We were very fortunate in that the third quarter report of county government expenditures showed a big decrease in expenditures. We viewed this as one-time money that should not be plowed into the budget generally, but it was the perfect opportunity to fund or return to the fund the money that the executive would have taken out, the $20 million. So that will be part of your final resolution. In addition, the council created a significant reconciliation list of items it was hoping to add to the budget. And in this case, the council took some very strong action to make reductions in the budget, and that provided you with the basis of being able to fund a reconciliation list. Also, in the executive's amendments to the budget, there were some additional revenues And what you see before you is a reconciliation list of approximately $15.6 million. It does not fund everything that you added, so the council president, in obtaining feedback from his colleagues, needed to make some tough choices, but what you have before you is the recommended reconciliation list. Mr. Howard, did you want to add anything?
Nope, nothing to add.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I'll just note a couple of things, and I know Councilmember Hucker has a motion he'd like to move forward with a slight change to some language within one of the line items. But this was a very strong process, and I want to go back 3 years. This body was diligent at the beginning of the pandemic in ensuring through a same-service budget that it put us in a position to be able to make the decisions that we are making right now. And those decisions at the time were understandably received with some degree of frustration among key stakeholders, which is certainly understandable given the growing needs across the board. But I think that responsible approach was important. And we also, as we will note in our respective comments, as we always do, try and balance all of these various and myriads of issues and challenges. But I just wanted to note that. And I want to thank our immediate past presidents, Councilmembers Navarro, Katz, and Hucker, who really helped set us on this course to take us where we are right now. So I don't see any other questions or comments from colleagues, so I'll turn it over to Councilmember Hucker to make a motion regarding some change to language within one of the line items.
Thanks, Mr. President. This is just an update to some suggested budget language regarding the Silver Spring bid. As you all remember, we overwhelmingly passed legislation to create the Silver Spring bid. I'm grateful, very much grateful to Councilmember Kramer and his staff for initiating that and working very hard on it. As a reminder, the entire county and region have suffered greatly, particularly economically during COVID, but Silver Springs really suffered over the last several years. We've lost dozens of small businesses, some that had been around for decades, like Mrs. K's, and survived many recessions. We've also seen a reduction in programming and aging and deteriorating physical infrastructure and fewer people on the street. Enjoying our retail and cultural assets, which has contributed to not only been a burden on our small businesses to keep them open, but has contributed to a perception of reduced safety. So I know we all want the same thing, Silver Spring that's once again vibrant and fun and has a cool downtown with a vigorous economy and thriving large and small businesses and feels clean and safe and vibrant, and as a regional destination. So people come to Silver Spring again from all over the region to enjoy all of our assets. We think that will be restored and better than ever if we can have professionals marketing Silver Spring and competing with other regional destinations that have bids like Northern Virginia and DC. So I'm grateful to all of you for including the seed money in this portion of the budget. Represents progress, and we need progress. It's less than the startup money and other bids, but we can return to that. It's certainly a good start today. But as important as it is to address the challenges Silver Spring has been facing, there were concerns about the details of the original state law that allowed bids to be created in Montgomery County. Very glad that the State Assembly updated their original state law this spring to expand the definition of who are considered stakeholders by adding elected representatives of commercial tenants to the bid board. I very much want to thank Delegate Charkoudian and the entire District 20 delegation and the entire Montgomery County delegation for supporting that. This is a great improvement. Everyone's eager to now hold the elections for the commercial tenant and seat the winner, new commercial tenants on the bid board. So I'm offering this language to make clear to the community that the council fully supports the reforms made to the state law in 2022 by the state delegation to democratize the bid board and seat a board that reflects both property owners and tenants in the future. And the language has been circulated to you, but reads thusly. This resolution appropriates $200,000 to the community grants non-developmental for the Silver Spring Business Improvement District. The Department of Finance must not disperse this funding to the Silver Spring bid until the corporation's board is reconstituted to address recent amendments to Maryland Code Annotated Economic Development 12605 that now requires the board to include representation from commercial tenants. So I move that language.
Moved by Councilmember Hucker, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. I'm sorry, Councilmember Reamer. I see no discussion here, so all those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present in virtual.
Thank you.
So with that, colleagues, can I get a motion to accept the operating budget reconciliation as amended and recommended by by staff? Moved by Council Vice President Glass, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. See no discussion, and this is, of course, a straw vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present in virtual. Thank you. My colleagues and I will have an opportunity now to reflect on this budget and make comments. Once again, after I give my little spiel here, we're going to go to Council Vice President Glass and then go to my colleagues in the order in which we vote. So, this week, as I reflected on the budget we are about to approve, it occurred to me that this is the 18th budget I've had a hand in shaping. My early experience with the county budget was as an executive for a nonprofit organization, then later as a cabinet official, and now as council president. Those experiences provided valuable context that helps me see this budget from multiple angles. While the $6.3 billion budget before us contains tens of thousands of line items, an overwhelming amount, I know that each of those line items tells an important story, and together they create the foundation for what is most important to us. A community with excellent schools, housing for all residents, strong economic development, green spaces for recreation and relaxation, safe neighborhoods, robust libraries, a community with strong public health and where seniors can age with grace and support, a healthy environment, and a safety net that ensures food, housing, health for our vulnerable residents. Every budget brings its own set of challenges and opportunities, and this budget, frankly, is among the strongest I can remember. Thanks to the support of federal and state partners and an economic recovery that was stronger than anticipated, we have more resources to work with than we imagined possible at the beginning of the pandemic. In fact, over the last year, we have been working more closely with our state and local leaders to identify ways to help our community thrive, and they have come through for us on many different levels. I am proud that this council worked diligently to ensure that we balance the growing needs in our community with fiscal responsibility. We accomplished this without raising taxes and by fully funding our reserves to ensure that our county will remain strong in the face of challenges that threaten our financial security, a potential looming recession, and the growing inflation rate, which has us all very concerned. But this budget puts our county on a firm footing for the future. We listened to our residents who, to their credit, even during a pandemic, made the effort during the budget process to make their voices heard on the critical issues that matter. They wrote, testified, texted, tweeted, and posted their opinions, which helped shape the budget we will approve today. And while, as is often the case, we weren't able to meet every interest, we came as close as I think was reasonably possible. A heavy emphasis of this budget is supporting our most vulnerable populations. We recognize that the Department of Health and Human Services has been at the center of the county's COVID-19 response and needed to significantly increase many services to meet those emergency needs of our residents. And funding more than $420 million for DHHS will go a long way in supporting the department and supporting our most vulnerable populations. We recognize that as the pandemic federal funds decrease, we will need to continue to assess the needs of our community and do our best to backfill those federal funds. We focused on the most critical yet most basic needs of our residents. Food insecurity continues to be a significant need across our county. We supported over $1 million to create the new Office of Food System Resiliency and $4 million in one-time funding to continue the county's response to food insecurity. We supported the outstanding work of our minority health initiatives and programs and approved more than $12 million for the continuation of their essential delivery of culturally competent services and resources. We approved $5.6 million to enhance the funding for the county's consolidated service hubs and recognize the vital role of these service hubs within the county's provider network and their overwhelming achievements in building and executing this community-based model, which serves as a strong foundation moving forward. We also recognize the need to further support our nonprofit partners and increase by 2% on top of the 6% recommended by the county executive to base contracts, and also extended that to other nonprofit partners. This was an important investment. We recognize the need to support our schools during one of the most challenging times in the history of education and funded our schools with a record $2.9 billion. And we fully funded Montgomery College's request at $312.2 million with resources to maintain tuition rates with no increase and supported expansion into the East County. We funded multiple mental health initiatives and social services for high school students, including an increase of $3.7 million for mental health and case management services at 10 priority high schools without an existing wellness center. We also added $5.5 million to expand mental health, case management, and positive youth development services through the Street Outreach Network and community-based providers to all high schools without an existing high school wellness center program. We funded $250,000 for the expansion of the girls' sports leagues and increased out-of-school time programming with an additional $2.2 million to help close the opportunity gap that widened during the pandemic. We supported the level of funding of $10.9 million for the Early Care and Education NDA, which is an important infrastructure project which will allow us to enhance opportunities for early childhood development for our entire community. We approved $2.5 million in funding for the Guaranteed Income Pilot, which is a transformational pilot program that I believe will go a long way in helping to break the cycle of poverty in our community. During the most critical times of the global pandemic, our first responders and many county employees have stood on the front lines facing increased risks, trauma, and mental health challenges stemming from on-the-job stress. And we know that we are in a critically important time as we address rising crime, but that we balance ensuring the transparency and accountability of first responders and law enforcement with the recognition that these are tough jobs on a good day, and that we have significant and historical recruitment and retention issues that have to be addressed. To that end, we collectively move forward with ensuring that the Police Accountability Board received the staffing level and support necessary to help ensure that accountability and transparency. But we also took steps to ensure that we funded through compensation the hard work of our first responders, including law enforcement, so that we help address some of the myriad of needs that we have in that department that are very real and have to be addressed moving forward. Our world is facing a climate emergency. The past several years, and especially the last few months, our residents have felt the brunt of climate change right here in our community. We have experienced record flooding, and in one tragic case, a young man lost his life trying to save his mom in a flash flood. In this budget, the Council increased our Department of Environmental Protection by 116% to ensure that our county will be a leader in the effort to fight climate change. This includes initiatives to boost our clean energy conservation programs, and climate education and outreach. The Council also, as we noted just a little while ago, made significant investments in the Green Bank, which is a further demonstration of our commitment to address climate change here in Montgomery County. And as we know, an aging infrastructure and limited transit options are a recipe for tremendous challenges. So this year, the Council invested $228.6 million in our Department of Transportation to balance affordability and equal access to transportation. Ride-on and call-in ride services will be restored to pre-pandemic levels, and we will build a zero-emissions bus fleet, the first of its kind in the nation, to help our county reach its climate action plan goals. And as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, I'm delighted that we added nearly $1 million in grants for local nonprofit organizations to provide transportation services for individuals who are disabled or seniors or individuals with limited incomes. In addition, the Council approved $50 million for the Housing Production Fund, bonds for the Housing Opportunity Commission to fund new construction of affordable housing. Housing remains one of those infrastructure challenges, which is on its most basic level a supply and demand issue, and one that we have to address moving forward to help ensure we meet the needs of our community. Economic development, quality of life, all of it stems from that work and ensuring quality housing that is affordable for all of our residents. Economic development is the driving force that provides for the high quality of life that we all enjoy here in our community. And we added, in addition to dedicating $4 million to our Economic Development Fund, which helps attract and keep employers here in our county this year, we provided $2.1 million to help our hotel and motel industry, which has been deeply impacted by the pandemic. Many of our urban areas need assistance in promoting their small businesses in commercial hubs, and with the $10 million we provided to establish business improvement districts, they will be able to provide bids to boost their marketing and promotion to continue to grow their downtowns. And our economic development partner, the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, received $6.2 million to continue their marketing efforts. This and so much more would not be possible, the work to get us where we are, without the incredible support of staff. And there are numerous critical players in the budget process. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to my team, Joy Nurmi, Lillian Cruz, Beth Schumann, and Maida Bayonet. I want to thank them for their leadership and dedication. The Council President's office carries an important responsibility, and I learned it is not a ceremonial position, and carries with it a tremendous amount of weight and long hours for our teams. And I have never been more impressed with the way that our team has stepped forward, and want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for that commitment and hard work. We are also fortunate as council members, but more importantly as county residents, to have a remarkably talented and committed central staff. I want to thank Executive Director Marlene Michelson, Deputy Director Craig Howard, and all of their team, as well as the Director of the Office of Legislative Oversight, Chris Seiler. And thank you also to Sonia Healy and our Public Information team for building critical bridges in our community as we sort through the noise and the challenges and making sure we get the right information out to our public. I'd also like to thank our Clerk of the Court, Judy Roop, and our outgoing clerk, Selena Singleton, for keeping the trains moving on time. And of course, I especially want to thank our IT staff, who have done phenomenal work and allowed us to work in this hybrid environment in a way that has been pretty extraordinary and seamless. While at times the last several years have felt exhausting, overwhelming, and yes, some days depressing, I quite frankly have never felt more confident about the future of our community and our county. This budget sets a strong foundation that keeps Montgomery County moving forward and affirms the principle that we all succeed when we all succeed. So thank you all very much. I now turn it over to Council Vice President Glass to make his comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your leadership over these last number of months. I want to extend my appreciation to colleagues for the deliberation and for residents for their engagement over the last few weeks. Because determining the $6.3 billion operating budget really has, among all things, been an exercise in fiscal discipline. With the support of our federal and state partners, we've created a fiscal document that I think reflects the needs of residents today and the needs of our residents into the future, while most importantly, maintaining our current tax rate. And so this really is a budget that truly benefits all of our residents. And this budget includes a record level of education funding, nearly $3 billion for MCPS and more than $300 million for Montgomery College, recognizing that our youth are our future and we need to invest in them. But the investment is also a signal to students and to their parents that education is a child's path to success, but it also, this budget, sets us on a trajectory to enact the blueprint for Maryland's future in the coming years. And when youth succeed in the classroom, we also want them to continue to succeed in our community. And that's why I was proud to lead the expansion of the MCPD's cadet program, which gives local college students the opportunity to serve their community by providing firsthand experience with the police force. And I appreciate my colleagues' support of that expansion, because the cadet program reflects the diversity of Montgomery County, which is home to 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in the country. And of the 15 participants in this program in the year 2020, 5 were Latino, 4 were Black, 2 were Asian American, which is nearly a 75% diversity rate. And that is a complement to the police department as a whole, which is approximately 75% white. And this program has been an effective tool in recruitment and providing a diverse pool of candidates to help protect and serve the residents of Montgomery County. And so I know that this will move us in a direction of meeting our public safety goals and also preparing the next generation to serve the community that they grew up in, because at the end of the day, this is the true definition of community policing. And the word community is actually my favorite word. I've said that before, I say it often, and it has been my focus throughout this budget, the word community, ensuring that our community remains healthy and safe, and ensuring that we continue to support growing families and provide direct assistance to them. You know, we've all heard from residents, not only here in our community, across the state and across the country, about the shortage of baby formula and the increased cost of diapers due to inflation. And I'm proud that we are supporting the DC Diaper Bank by allocating additional funding to help low-income families get the food, get the diapers, and get the baby supplies that they desperately need. And this initiative is a reflection of the lessons we've learned during the pandemic, and one that we cannot forget as we enter the new normal. This pandemic has also exposed the inequities that many of us knew have existed for years. And I'm proud that we have funded an expansion of the African American Health Program, the Latino Health Initiative, and the Asian American Health Initiative, because expanding access to healthcare at the barbershop and in the community is the best way to make our community feel safe. These are the anchored programs throughout Montgomery County's most vulnerable communities, and I think they are among the most valuable and important programs that we in county government have. Another one of my priorities during this budget process is to ensure that our most vulnerable are safe, healthy, and housed. And as the council's lead on homelessness in vulnerable communities, I've joined my colleagues, particularly the ones on the HHS committee, to support our services to end and prevent homelessness and to redouble our commitment. I'll say that again, redouble our commitment to working with nonprofit and social service providers during this time of rising costs and fiscal uncertainty, making sure that they have the support that they need moving forward. This budget also reflects our commitment to making sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. It is also a commitment to making sure that housing stability is here for residents in need, and making sure that the families who are experiencing or are at risk of experiencing homelessness have the support systems in place. We have allocated $3 million, an additional $3 million for the rental assistance program, which will provide approximately 800 permanent shallow housing subsidies. One of my top priorities during this budget was to build off the success of the Kids Ride Free program by extending free ride-on access to every resident who needs it here in Montgomery County. Due to fiscal constraints, we were not able to make buses completely free in this budget, but we collectively, with the county executive, were able to lower fares to $1, half the cost of the pre-pandemic level of $2 a ride. And so while $1 is not free, it does make progress and moves us in the direction to achieving true transit equity for all riders in our community. And public transit is a public good, and I plan to continue this effort in the years ahead to make our buses free for everybody in the county. And as we work to improve our transportation networks, we also have to improve road safety. And the capital improvement budget, which we also approve, contains more than $400 million to advance our pedestrian, bicycle, and road improvements, moving us one step closer to achieving our Vision Zero goals. And this investment is so critically important. Since January 1st of this year, more than 175 residents have been hit on our roadways, and 6 people have been killed. It's tragic, and it's preventable. And this funding will make our roads safer for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for drivers, for everyone. And as a former nonprofit executive, I know all too well the increased costs and demands in our nonprofit sector, and collectively the 8% cost of living that we have provided to that sector is so incredibly important. It's overdue and it's necessary, because nonprofits are facing staffing shortages that the larger community, larger sector is as well. And we need to make sure that our social safety net remains strong. And the best way to do that is to make sure that we have people holding that social safety net and are gainfully employed within the sector. And so in summary, this budget does a lot of good. But there's still a lot more work ahead of us to make sure that Montgomery County is an even more fair and equitable place for every single resident. And so that conversation will continue, but for now, I believe this budget moves us in that direction. It is fiscally sustainable, and it puts vulnerable communities first, and we should all be proud. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Another year, another budget. As I begin my thoughts, I want to join the chorus to thank the Dream Team, Ms. Michelson and Mr. Howard, and the entire council staff for all their amazing hard work to get us to today. Once again, this year, we are so very fortunate to have financial assistance from federal dollars to help us balance our budget. Montgomery County has fared so much better than so many other jurisdictions regarding COVID and the needs associated with their recovery from the past 2+ years. We are certainly in a much better place fiscally than we had anticipated. Although this is a good thing, it's fleeting. The American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA funds, as well as special appropriations from the state, are contributing to our better than expected situation. That said, we have accomplished some very good things in this budget. As chair of the Public Safety Committee, I am pleased that as a part of the Public Safety Agency budgets, we were able to bring our pay scales in line with surrounding jurisdictions. Unfortunately, we had been lagging behind for far too long. The changes we were able to implement should aid in both our recruiting and retention of first responders and public safety personnel. This budget supports Vision Zero, a program which provides for the planning and implementation of educational, engineering, and enforcement efforts to reduce the number of traffic-related fatalities to zero. We need to do more to make sure that all drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and bicyclists are safe. Our goal is to eliminate serious and fatal collisions on county roads by 2030. Just one serious injury or fatality is one too many. In addition, this budget delivers a well-deserved inflationary increase to the nonprofit sector. These organizations have been on the ground doing the work of keeping our most vulnerable residents safe, housed, fed, and educated. County government could not function without our nonprofit partners. The budget expands girls' sports leagues and increases sports access for underserved communities. We know that there is a huge gap in sports participation between girls and boys. Playing sports teaches life skills such as teamwork. It also increases your strength and stamina, as well as boosts your self-confidence. The Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments analyzed that our county needs to add at least 320,000 housing units to our region between 2020 and 2030. This budget will help us move closer to this important housing goal by making record-level investments in affordable housing. I, too, want to acknowledge the leadership and thank Chair Navarro and my colleague, Councilmember Friedson, on the Government Operations Committee, and all of our colleagues on this dais on the reduction of debt. This has not been easy, but it certainly was very necessary. Although I am pleased where we ended up, there are, of course, still many unmet needs that we need to focus our attention on. I look forward to working with my colleagues to continue to provide the services that are so very necessary to each and every one of our residents. Thank you, Mr. President, and I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Councilmember Jawando, joining us virtually.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by thanking you and your team, as well as our central staff, for leading us through this budget season. And I want to thank the Vice President Glass as well for his assistance. It is finally really nice to have a budget before us, despite the fact that it can be challenging to decide what to allocate funds to, especially after a couple of years of same service budgets. It's really nice to have a budget where we have that opportunity to make those decisions at a time when we really need it. And as we are transitioning to a endemic phase of COVID, my talking to you this way right now is a part of the proof that we're not out of this pandemic yet, and that while we are in a different phase, we're going to still need to remain vigilant to address both the health and economic and social, emotional, and many other consequences that we're still dealing with as a result of these last 2.5 years as we work together towards an equitable recovery. And while we see things opening up and we're excited about the spring and summer, we are also seeing a surge in COVID cases. So it's very important that you underscore that you get your vaccinations and boosters and continue to do safe practices that our residents led the way in across the country, and we're very proud of. And while I'm happy to see many of the priorities that in the budget that I'll highlight in a moment, I hope to work with this council and future councils to make sure that we don't turn away and address the systemic and structural inequities that have been laid bare during this pandemic, and in the inequitable sharing of opportunity that we've been working really hard on this council to address. A couple of things I want to highlight. Montgomery College, this is one of our crown jewels, and a key lever and a key institution as far as our economic success and our overall health and expansion of opportunity to our entire community. And that's something that we all believe, and I believe deeply that every resident should have access to opportunity and the ability to achieve their God-given potential. And Montgomery College, just celebrating their graduates, and I'm sorry to the presidential scholars yesterday, the first class. I wasn't able to be with you due to my COVID diagnosis, but we're so proud of you, that this budget will help expand that opportunity, including seed funding for a new campus in East County, the East County Educational Center, which will be a full new campus at one point, which I can't wait to celebrate down the line. And is just a further example of the college's commitment and this council's commitment to expansion of opportunity. Montgomery County Public Schools, the nearly $3 billion plus of our budget that is desperately needed at a time when our students are dealing with a learning loss, of course, but also a mental health crisis in their community. And this funding will help us to transform under the leadership of Dr. McKnight and the school board and retool one of the best education systems in the country, one of the largest, to address these needs and gaps. This historic level of funding is over $100 million compared to last year, and it's appropriate because we have significant needs with our students. I'm seeing it in our own household with my MCPS students, with our children, and we're seeing it across the county. It's been difficult for our educators as well, who have had to manage the pandemic, teaching in a new way, the stresses and the pressures on their students. So this is going to support a holistic school community and innovative programs that allow us to thrive and remain one of the top educational school systems in the country. I look forward to continue to support that. As far as systems change, I'm really happy, and Council President mentioned this, to partner with him to lead and kick off, and with the support of all our colleagues, the Guaranteed Income Pilot, the first in Maryland, that is launching this year and will provide 300 families with $800 a month to help them be sustainable and grow their income, including helping 100 families or individuals in the continuum of care in our homeless community. This is a proven program that we're going to add to that research base to alleviate poverty and provide a form of financial stability to all of our residents, and be a new innovative way long-term for us to provide support. And we know we're going to have to do things differently. We're really excited that MoCo Boost will be, which stands for Building Our Opportunity and Strength Today, will be kicking off, and that support will be continued in this budget. Big thank you to the Meyer Foundation for their support of over $1 million to make it possible. The wellness centers that I know Councilmember Navarro will mention, so I won't say too much, but I will say this. As part of our commitment to our students and their well-being and safety and health, this significant and historic investment will put us on a path that I hope to take the baton with colleagues and continue to make sure that we can build out these spaces and services and wraparound services in every high school and deep down into all of our schools in a very measured and appropriate way. And I want to thank Councilmember Navarro for putting this formal proposal forward. Our students needed this before the pandemic, but it's an absolute necessity now. We look forward to working with MCPS to continue to fund that, including the brand new one that's going to open at the Kennedy High School that we're excited to fund here as well. Also excited about the list of mental health services that we've worked with all colleagues to support. Every Mind's expansion of the hotline that we've done, the street outreach network, community-based health providers, our mental health services, and all of our employees and staff who are addressing these significant needs of our students. I'm proud as lead for libraries that this will also be an investment in our library system. These 22 jewels, 21, and then one in Clarksburg Jail, and a new one coming in a few years in Clarksburg, that have gone above and beyond during the pandemic to meet the needs of our residents, passing out over a million items of PPE and tests, and then also serving in other capacities throughout the county while still remaining open and doing contactless holds and providing residents services and online programming, something that didn't exist to this extent prior to the pandemic. So I want to thank them. I know it's been difficult, one of our oldest populations, but they've stepped up, and I'm glad we're going to be able to fund additional resources to help speed up hiring and try other innovative programming through our library budget. I'm also really excited about Summer Rise, which is a program I had the opportunity to lead before I was a council member, providing career and work-based learning experiences to our students. We're including an additional $60,000 to expand that program and offer more students the opportunities to partner with a local business or nonprofit or government entity during this summer and receive a stipend that they will be able to learn and think about what they want to do and how they can contribute to the world. I hope to continue to increase this program, which will serve over 800 students this summer, but we need to get it into the thousands, and I know we'll do that. I'm excited also, as Councilmember Katz mentioned, about the expansion of girls' sports leagues and increasing sports access to our historically underserved populations. We know that's such a critical, important tool. It's been important to my daughters and to so many across the county. I also finally want to mention the work of the African American Health Program and the Latino Health Program and Salute a Benigni Star for all of their work to make sure that we narrow these gaps and these inequities, particularly during COVID. I'm glad we're doubling down on that, as well as our food programming that we're doubling down in MANA and all the great partners in the hubs that have created this system of social safety net that we have grown and strengthened, that we will continue to grow and strengthen and not turn our backs on. And then finally, our nonprofits and our small businesses. I'm glad in this budget we are increasing the inflationary increase in the cost of care and understanding that our nonprofits are a part of our service delivery and the backbone of this county. We honored Kim Jones earlier today as an example of one of those many organizations and people she's helped that we couldn't do our work without, and really want to thank our colleagues for that. And actually finally now our support of Black businesses in this and small businesses in this budget to make sure that as the economic engines and the growth of our county, that we're going to make sure that everyone equitably comes back from this and can thrive and participate in our economy, which helps all residents. So we're really excited about that. So appreciate all my colleagues, as well as investments in affordable housing and safe routes to schools, for supporting those. And I just think the best years ahead for this county and for this council. And this budget puts us on a great path. Thanks again to the council president. Thank you to our wonderful staff, central staff who worked really hard, and to all of our residents who came and testified and told us what was important. And last but certainly not least, my staff, Cecily, Seamus, Pam, and Callie and Christina, for all their work to help our residents and to help get me prepared for this budget season. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to all my colleagues.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
All right. Well, first, congratulations and thanks to Council President Gabe Albornoz. I hope you can get a deep sleep tonight if you didn't get any last night, and we really appreciate your efforts here steering the ship, and really excited about what this budget will accomplish. And your team has done a terrific job as always. They're probably heading back to work. I don't see Joy in the room, but appreciate working with you and Director Marlene Michelson and your team. Amazing work. And I want to especially thank the staff that has worked through at the Fed Committee, Pam Dunn and Lavu Nadeau and Gene Smith and others. Really have appreciated your efforts. On schools, this budget continues our record investment in schools. We know that our kids have suffered devastating learning losses during COVID, and it's going to take a really concerted effort to recover. I am really pleased to be able to join colleagues in providing significant resources for our schools, and we'll need to work together going forward to focus on accountability and effective implementation. I'm also very pleased that the budget builds on all the work that we've been doing together for years. We're adding more seats for early childhood education and working toward our goal of ensuring every child has access to pre-K. And thank you, Councilmember Navarro, for your work over many years on these issues and for your proposal around mental health and wellness centers. This budget contains a significant improvement in our investment in the mental health and well-being of our school kids. I believe there is a near $10 million program now to provide wellness centers in every high school that we will be standing up. And I am pleased to see how that will develop and embody a new and smarter approach to safety. On housing, I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank my Fed Committee members, Council Members Friedson and Jawando. I want to thank Council President Albornoz and every member of the Council, because once again, we have continued our laser focus on housing affordability, and we've approved a record amount of funding for affordable housing. We increased our low-cost construction loan fund for our Housing Opportunities Commission from $50 million, which we added 2 years ago, to $100 million for our Housing Production Fund. And that is an innovative housing model that shares the social housing vision that our Fed Committee explored in 2019. The groundbreaking model that we are funding here has already been copied around the country, and HOC projects that it will be able to contribute housing that can meet nearly a third at its peak of our annual housing production goals, according to our COG vision. So this is a significant step forward. We approved a $40 million down payment on a new housing preservation fund, which we also hope to expand to $100 million in coming months. We know, for example, that the Purple Line corridor will take about $100 million in financing to preserve affordability on more than 5,000 housing units there. And this funding is going to move us substantially forward in that direction. We also increased funding available by $1 million for down payment assistance for county residents, reversing a proposed reduction in the county executive's budget. And along with visionary master plans, including the No Net Loss of Affordable Housing Veers Mill Corridor Plan, the Forest Glen Plan, the Silver Spring Plan, this council has enacted historic housing reforms and the accessory dwelling units legislation. We have made major major strides on housing policy. On climate, much has been said, and there's a lot of exciting progress here. I just want to give a shout out again for the Green Bank funding, which was remarkable, very innovative, and includes a measure that I proposed, which will ensure that our funds are spent for electric-only equipment, part of a vision of electrification that is really the path forward for combating climate change. And so ensuring that we're funding solar and electric and geothermal and other equipment rather than natural gas or other types of fossil fuel-based equipment. On black business, I want to thank the county executive for following our lead, working with us to codify the investment in small business resources that are targeted to communities of color in the county. And I am really looking forward to moving this ahead this coming year. We're going to step into the conversion of the Silver Spring incubator in making it a center of excellence for support of businesses and entrepreneurs of color. We are starting a feasibility process for a new CDFI to provide financing for black businesses and businesses of color. We'll begin to train small business owners and entrepreneurs in procurement and bringing forward a vibrant community of entrepreneurs to strengthen our county's economic development program. On bids and main streets, I am really pleased we have approved a down payment for the development of the Silver Spring bid, working our way through what has been a challenging conversation, and there's more to come. I know we're going to see a new, bigger, and more inclusive board of directors now that has been allowed by state law, and we'll be able to return to additional funding as we progress. And we have approved $500,000 for the burgeoning other bids in the county. And particularly, I'm thrilled by the Main Streets program. That is a program that I highlighted when we considered the bid legislation and recommended that we consider a funding strategy to stand up Main Street organizations in the county, and now we're going to be moving forward with that. For after school and sports, this budget funds a continuing expansion of the rec department's after school programs like Excel Beyond the Bell. And I've been so proud to work closely with Action in Montgomery and other community groups and the rec department to try to rebuild this essential program from years ago and continue its expansion today. There are thousands of kids today in high priority schools who are benefiting from comprehensive programs. And I'm thrilled that this budget continues to build on our work with the Kid Museum, creating an innovation lab, for example, partnering with MCPS to change how MCPS teaches science and other critical skills and learning programs in the schools. And we have continued we have two exciting new programs, continuing one and adding another for youth sports. Play Montgomery, and I want to give a shout out for council members Albornoz and Rice, who proposed Play Montgomery during COVID to ensure there were resources for youth sports leagues. We are continuing our investment in that program, and we're creating a new program that I've recommended with Council President Albornoz to build sports leagues and programs focused on sports that get the highest participation from girls. And that is going to be really exciting. Big shout out for Councilmember Rice here. We worked together to create something, and to all of the council members for their strong support, the Ready Institute. And I don't want to steal Councilmember Rice's thunder necessarily, but we convened a joint meeting of the Fed Committee and the EC Committee in January of 2019 to talk about tech talent and our county's workforce development strategy. We worked together, of course, through challenging decisions about WorkSource Montgomery, but all the time we kept our eyes on the need to build a different model for how the educational institutions in the county can interface with our private sector and our government to create new investments and new educational programs for the talent that our companies need to grow. So today we have funded the first phase of the Universities at Shady Grove's Ready Institute, because everything that we do, affordable housing, funding schools, economic development, it's all about creating opportunity, and that's what Ready is going to be able to help build. Ready will bring together partners from MCPS, Montgomery College, the private sector, and they'll work to develop career pathways that are focused on the student experience and preparing for a lifelong successful career. This is a really critical piece that we've been missing, and we will look to connect the dots in finding opportunity pathways through all of the institutions and employers that we have in Montgomery County and make sure that all students have the ability to navigate them. Again, thanks to Dr. Condamian from USG for her leadership, frankly, bold leadership in bringing this forward. On the capital budget, I am really pleased that this budget includes a record investment in the bike and pedestrian safety infrastructure in our equity emphasis areas, which I work closely with WABA to develop. And it provides increased funding for our BIPAs, our bicycle and pedestrian priority areas in Wheaton, Silver Spring, Tacoma Langley, Veers Mill, Randolph, a program that I created 7 year ago with council members' support. This budget continues our commitment to the Purple Line by rejecting the executive's repeated attempts to defund the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel into the heart of Bethesda. We want to get the Purple Line done right. This capital budget also finally funds 2 of our long proposed BRT lines, thanks in large part to the agreement that this council negotiated to get a large new infusion of transit funding from the state. These lines will urbanize 355 and allow us to promote smart growth development in that corridor, and they'll promote safety on Veers Mill while providing a high-quality transit connection from Wheaton all the way to Germantown. Doing right by the Up-County, we were able to accelerate construction of the first phase of Observation Drive Extended, which is a critical connection for Clarksburg and the future route for BRT there. And we're sustaining our commitment to upgrading our playing fields, our athletic fields in the county. Parks has been a great partner in this effort, and I'm pleased we're providing record funding. The Equal Justice Institute project, a lynching memorial, has received planning funding, and we've provided operating funding for the Reconciliation Commission to continue its important work, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses. I want to thank my colleagues on T&E and the Council and the Commission on People with Disabilities, especially Dr. Morgan. We work together to get more out of our charges on Uber and Lyft to provide wheelchair-accessible vehicles on our road. We have taken now the biggest step forward yet to stand up a fleet of vehicles that can provide adequate taxi and on-demand transportation services for people who use wheelchairs. Finally, on OPEB, while the federal government, under the leadership of President Biden, has managed to save us from the jaws of a major recession by investing in this country, the storm clouds are gathering again. I was frustrated that the county executive did not make enough effort to plan for how we can afford to maintain our level of service in years ahead if the economy does falter. And we're seeing the markets are already down substantially this year. Nonetheless, I'm very glad that we stuck to our promise to restore the executive's grade on the OPEB trust, which funds health insurance obligations for our retirees. It was not easy to find the money, but we have to plan for the future, and we've created a buffer for ourselves should we have stormy seas ahead. Thank you to my colleagues and to all those who participated in the process.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Reamer. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Council President. Well, COVID is still among us, and we are seeing an increase in cases. But compared to the last 2 years, it's been a real relief to approach this budget with additional state funding, increased tax revenue, and improved public health compared to previous budgets. This one allows us to meet the diverse needs of our residents and puts the county back on track to meet a lot of our critical goals. It continues the work we did over the last year to strengthen successful initiatives that we expanded during the pandemic, like the minority health initiatives, but it also advances our climate, our affordable housing, our public safety goals, and many more. I had hoped that we would use the lessons we learned during the pandemic to better serve and strengthen our community and to address longstanding inequities, and I believe this budget does that. The budget before us wouldn't have been possible, obviously, without the great work by our central, our council office, and our executive staff. So thanks so much to my office staff, particularly Chief of Staff Julio Murillo, our outstanding central staff, Marlene and Craig, but also Dr. Orlin and Ms. Farag, who staff the committees I serve on, and I see their great work up close every week. And thanks to you, Mr. Council President and Vice President, for a great process this year. After last year, I know firsthand what a difficult process you've been through over the last several months, and believe me, I'm perfectly happy to let you lead the process this year with your unflappable leadership style. So thanks to you, and your staff for getting us to this day as efficiently as possible. And equally important, I want to thank all the stakeholders and residents who testified in person and virtually. We received insightful recommendations and impactful stories. Your input and your voice is invaluable as we make decisions. The budget public hearings always serve as a reminder of how many obstacles and challenges face our residents every day, but it also highlights the great assets that our residents are and the talent that they bring to the table in this public decision-making process. I want to share a few budget highlights about why I support this budget enthusiastically. As chair of the Transportation and Environment Committee, I want to thank Councilmember Reamer and Council Vice President Glass, as well as DOT leadership and DEP leadership and all the stakeholders for their collaboration and work during the process. On the transportation side, I'm glad the budget added $1 million in grants for nonprofits to provide transportation service to seniors and individuals with limited income and individuals who are disabled. Furthermore, we increased the Safe Routes to School program and added funding for school walkshed assessments, which has been long awaited. And we supported funds for bus rapid transit on 355 and Veers Mill and US 29, as well as the Great Seneca Science Corridor Transitway. And it included funding to expand our bike and pedestrian infrastructure and to accelerate the transition of Ride-On's fleet to electric buses over the next several years. On the environmental side, we're fully funding DEP and moving forward on our climate and stormwater goals again. The budget includes funding to hire new staff and covering operating costs for new and expanded climate change program and including the climate change planning NDA. That includes funding for the prioritization of greenhouse gas reduction strategies and the development of an implementation plan to meet the county's greenhouse gas goals. In the same effort, I'm very excited, obviously, about the Green Buildings Now Act, which we commented on earlier, and grateful to Councilmember Friedson and all of you for your support for that. Our first responders go above and beyond the call of duty every day and have dealt with unprecedented and very challenging circumstances the last few years. At the beginning of the pandemic, crime rose sharply while we had a thinning police department dealing with staff shortages and COVID safety protocols. So it's understandable they have very reduced morale and recruitment, and I'm glad that we could restore their salaries to a competitive position in the region. At the same time, we need a police department that's paid fairly and competitive salaries, but also one that's held to high standards and enjoys the confidence of our community. So I'm grateful for the funding and the purchase of 300 body-worn cameras to meet the requirements established in Bill 1821, which I introduced as part of our efforts to improve transparency following the disclosure of the abuse of the grandchild in East Silver Spring Elementary School by a couple of our officers. Funding that legislation will help us now make sure that we avoid and find out right away in the event of any future incidents of concern. And in the same vein, funding's included for the replacement of 90 mobile video cameras as well as the purchase of less lethal police equipment, and funding for additional staff to randomly review the footage and staff to assist with processing the record high number of Public Information Act requests that our police are receiving. In terms of education, nothing's obviously more important than our schools, so I'm very grateful that this budget expands early childhood learning opportunities in the county and expands the Career Pathways program. I'm grateful to Councilmember Navarro for her leadership on the high school wellness centers, which I'm sure everybody's going to mention, but it's a huge step forward to get those into every high school. And I'm grateful that this budget fully funds Montgomery College, whose class of 2022, I believe, is graduating this morning. So go Raptors. And I'm excited that we included funding for 10.5 positions for the East County Education Center. We've been talking about this for years. That's a huge first step toward bringing a much needed full campus to East County with the help of our state delegation to meet our responsibility to our young people, but it will also be a great asset for the college and our economy as a whole. And finally, I'm very grateful for our commitment to continue to fund our commitment to affordable housing, as we did last year. The Housing Initiative Fund, the Housing Opportunity Fund, and the new preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing are all good steps in the right direction to address the crisis we declared years ago and have been behind at addressing. Those are just a few of the things that I love the most about this budget. I really think it makes many needed investments in our priorities. And it represents a sigh of relief and a hope that we're getting back to normal. Just the fact that we can vote for it in person is a step toward putting the pandemic behind us. We're not out of the woods, and there's much more work for the council to do. But I do want to reiterate my strong commitment to continue working on behalf of and with residents to ensure a more equitable, healthy, safe, welcoming, and thriving Montgomery County. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hooker. And colleagues, after you speak, if you can hit your mic, because if more than one's on it, there could be some feedback. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Wow, so this is my 12th and last budget, I believe. And to be honest, first I want to acknowledge and express my gratitude to Councilmember Rice and Reamer, because as outgoing council members along with me, when I hear the reflections of my colleagues about this particular budget, I have to, recognize that it's all really predicated on a lot of the work of previous councils, and it's kind of like a story, right? It's like a narrative. And so I know a lot of this sounds familiar to the two of you in particular, and it will sound very familiar to everybody else as the years go by. But I will say that it is really important to also express my appreciation to Council President Albornoz, because it seems like every time you become council president, you really, you come in thinking that you know what's going to happen, and then everything just shifts day by day. And you've done such a great job with your staff to really, address all of these issues as they have hit us. So I want to thank you. I want to thank your staff. I also want to thank the administration staff, because obviously, here we are done, and pretty soon they're going to start working on next year's budget. And so complicated, complex issues, no doubt, and they deserve a lot of credit for everything they do. Our incredible central office staff, Ms. Michelson, thank you so much for also thinking through this team approach. I think it's worked so well. And everybody are, I can't say enough about all of our analysts. They are professionals. They are incredible. They are just so smart, and I admire each and every one of them. My amazing Team Navarro staff, Roland Nicoloa, Berta Cersosimo, Craig Wilson, Chris Leacock, and our great intern. We have a great intern, Luke, as well as Mayra Cruz Solis, who is still doing extraordinary work. I want to thank them for keeping me sane and understanding so well our District 4 needs, and also the macro needs of our incredible county. And so, again, it's so hard to just, pick and choose, because everything in this budget is so important. But I will say that for me, when I think of this budget overall, I think of equity. And I'm very moved, because I think that the work we did in 2019 on the racial equity and social justice law is not just about what it requires, but it has really, truly, in my opinion, become a culture change, where now you hear everybody that comes in front of us, every time we go out into the community, there's a conversation about equity and what it means and how can we best do that. And I saw it firsthand with our African American Health Program, En Por Nuestra Salud y Bienestar, which was predicated on this notion of how do we address this pandemic through this equity lens. And we saw how this has become a national model. And so I am very grateful to have played a role in getting that done, because to me, as I leave the council, I keep thinking about not just those micro needs that we have to address, but also those structural and systemic issues that we have got to address, and make sure that we put forth a trajectory that best serves the needs of our residents. And so under that vein, I will say that our GO committee, amazing admiration for Councilmember Katz and Friedson, because GO usually has quite a big lift. I know Councilmember Reamer was part of that committee as well. But, we had to immediately make sure we addressed the issue of the $20 million in OPEB during this budget, and we did that without hesitation. That was super important. What you heard about our debt service reduction, that is thanks to the work of this committee, no doubt. And I'm also proud to have played a role in maintaining our AAA bond rating since I took the helm of that committee in 2011, through a recession and now through a pandemic. But that is a collective effort. And we have stood very strong in terms of respecting our fiscal policies, which has led to us retaining that AAA bond rating. That's really important, as you just heard when we talk about our CIP deliberations. That's very important. Of course, early care and education, really critical. Structural, DREAM that I've had for a very long time. So pleased that we now just finished the last piece, which was to create a coordinating entity. And I believe we have over $20 million invested in early care and education, sets up so nicely as we address very soon what is coming through the blueprint for Maryland's future. So I'm very proud of that work. I will also just point out that our very swift work to establish and move forward with the full expansion of wellness centers to each high school, and hopefully also connecting to middle schools, was so critical. To me, that speaks to what we have learned about best practices, best models, and scalability. We're so fortunate in Montgomery County that we have all these best practices out there and models that we can learn from. The Wellness Center is one of them. And so we collectively said, hey, it is time to scale that up. It was a priority for me because, again, when you think about what is the most strategic intervention, this is a model that really has worked. And I am grateful to Luis Cardona, who is the lead, who is the director of the Street Outreach Network, because his work also is a model that I know I have prioritized throughout all my years in each budget. And I think will make a huge difference because every single day we read another story of another tragedy, and we know that right now there's still a lot of stress, especially for our young people. So I am really grateful to that, and to my colleagues for have supported this. It is absolutely important. Lastly, what I will say is that, our constituents, our residents, they're just the best. And through this pandemic, one of the silver linings have been this notion that we can have virtual public hearings, that we can have all these meetings in a virtual setting. That has been a real welcome silver lining because the participation has been just extraordinary. And I do hope that we continue to do that. I want to personally thank Sonia Healy and her communication staff because they have been instrumental in facilitating all of this quick adaptation in order to make sure that our very, very diverse Montgomery County population knows that they can be comfortable in participating in their civic process, that they can have a say in what happens in their communities. And I do really, truly believe that this council has once again set forth a model for the nation on how you can do that in a seamless way and in a respectful way, and how, of course, the decisions that we're making today are predicated on all of that feedback. And that to me is just wonderful. And I know that it will only continue to be strengthened as we go forward. So with that, again, I mean, there is just so much to appreciate in this budget, but I believe that it is because of this collective work that we're able to get to this point. And for that, again, I thank you so much. No easy thing, $6.3 billion, half of that to a school system, sends a signal of what it is that we value here in Montgomery County and what we will continue to do to keep this place one of the most amazing jurisdictions to call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. This past year has been especially poignant for me as my time here on the council comes to a close. And it's been quite a journey as I reflect the 12 years on this dais, and I'm just amazed at what we've been able to accomplish. You heard from Councilmember Navarro. I was sitting at Summer House at Pike and Rose yesterday and just looked around and thought to myself that this happened because of us. Mid-Pike Plaza used to be the home of one of the most vibrant places in Montgomery County under our watch. As we had the breakfast with MBIA at the brand new Marriott Hotel right next to Marriott headquarters in downtown Bethesda, and you look at all of those bright and shiny buildings that are there that happened under our watch, you can't help but be proud of what it is that we've been able to do over the course of this time. The record number of schools that we've constructed, public buildings like libraries and other public facilities that have come online. We've done a lot of good things. I remember when we came into this, and we came in during a recession, staring down a Clarksburg taxing district decision that I had to make, all while facing mid-year savings plan and a challenging budget that involved difficult cuts, including our school system, to try and put the county on a more sustainable path. We were debating about the future of school resource officers. Sounds familiar. And, we continue to this day to still assess the plan of how we move forward between the partnership of our schools and our police. And this past year has certainly highlighted the critical need to ensure that our safety of our children and those that are teaching and administrating in our schools is an utmost priority, coupled with the social and emotional needs of everyone that are in those buildings. I reflect back in 2014 when I served as council president, and we had some very difficult challenges posed by the Great Recession and the aftermath in his FY15 budget. Sound familiar, Council President Albornoz? It was during this year we were able to kind of turn a corner with MCPS and the Board of Education, really galvanizing a relationship that now continue to exist, allowing for new initiatives and programming to be put in place. And it really was a year where we were able to do a lot of great things in addressing our county's needs and varying priorities. It seems that during our tenure on this council, we've always had these insurmountable obstacles, but somehow we found the ability to be able to rise above them and continue moving our county forward. But nothing's hit us as hard as this pandemic has. Certainly realizing that this pandemic is certainly not over. You see so many of us up here wearing our masks again. And we've collaborated and innovated to make sure that the essential supports and resources that are necessary for our community are there for those who need them most. I am proud of everything that we have done to protect our residents and support them. I am proud of our values. I was at graduation for Gallaudet University where Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, was the graduation speaker. And he said one of the biggest things that he does is make sure that he leads with his values. This budget represents our values. It is a document reflecting what is most important to our community, including over half of our budget going to our Montgomery County Public Schools. Why? Because our children are our priority. As the son of an educator, I can't tell you how important it is and how fulfilling it has been to be the chair of the Council's Education and Culture Committee, because I know that education is at the core of all that we hold sacred in our community. And our strong educational partners, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, and the universities of Shady Grove continue to provide those innovative and accessible pathways that ensure the success of our community. And as you heard, we will benefit from the great work of the Kerwin Commission and the Blueprint, receiving $38.8 million in new funding that will help to support the wraparound services like what Councilmember Navarro has spearheaded with having our wellness centers in all of our schools. It means so much, and we see it now because so many of our children are hurting. We need to provide that support from pre-K to J to ensure that our kids are supported and on their path to success. We made an early care and education coordinating entity this year in the midst of a pandemic, prioritizing the focus on pre-kindergarten, making sure that we have a structure that's in place to think about how we develop high quality childcare here in Montgomery County. One of the main reasons why Councilmember Navarro got into this, focusing on that, knowing how important it was. And finally, the investment in girls' sports is one that is incredibly important to me as the father of two daughters, because I think that it helps to address some of the inequities of the past. The gender disparities in sports start early, and it really is important for us to make sure that girls benefit from the improved health, social, and emotional life outcomes that come from participating in sports. And so when I look at this operating budget as a whole, I thank our partners. I thank Montgomery County Public Schools for tapping into their resources. I thank Montgomery College for digging deep and tapping into their resources, understanding that we need to do this together. We are trying to accomplish a common goal, which is to ensure that we have an educational ecosystem that addresses equity and make sure that we have coordination amongst all of our partners. That is the reason why the Ready Institute, in my partnership with Councilmember Reamer and Dr. Kademian, I think is really going to be so important to the future of this educational ecosystem here in Montgomery County. And Montgomery College, how can I not thank you enough for continuing to answer the need when it comes to building our workforce of tomorrow, retooling those who know that they want to enter into different career pathways, and focusing on so many things that we know are so important. The Isaiah and Catherine Leggett building will be an amazing testament to the continued support of why it is that Montgomery College remains one of the best community colleges in the nation. So I just want to go back to something that is the reason why I got into elected office. When my wife and I moved to Germantown, I noted that there wasn't a hospital. And I said to her, why do we have to drive all the way down to Shady Grove? Doesn't make any sense. My wife was pregnant at the time, obviously, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to quit my job and run for office because I want to make a difference. And my wife looked at me like I was crazy, like she does every day, and said, what do you mean? And I said, I think I can make a difference. I think I can actually make a change. And she said, you know what? I believe in you. It is amazing to think now, 16 years later, about what it is that I've been able to accomplish. Shady Grove Emergency Center was the first was the first kind of foray we had at having public health in Germantown, followed years later by Holy Cross Germantown. But it didn't stop there. It continued on, and I can't be more proud of what we just opened in partnership with Montgomery College and Montgomery County Public Schools and county government. That's the Ignite Hub, something that is now just gaining traction, that everybody is realizing how big this truly is. A partnership between Apple Corporation, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, and Montgomery College all coming together to make sure that there's a space that brings opportunity to aspiring entrepreneurs, students, and small business. And this past weekend, we celebrated this grand opening, and it's received amazing response. I can't tell you how many people in the community have reached out who want to be a part. When you talk about leaving a legacy, I'm so lucky. I've been so blessed. And if I were to reflect on anything that could be my lasting legacy, it is that Ignite Hub, something that represents the future of education and connectivity for so many who find themselves disconnected from the technological age. Education is a strong part of my identity, and so too is being a Black man, and the unique responsibilities that come as serving as a person of color in this position. I know that Council President Albornoz, Councilmember Giwando, and Councilmember Navarro know this weight of responsibility far too well. People look to us as the voice. They look to us as the representatives of the community. That weighs heavy on your shoulders. But I think that we have been very, very well supported by our colleagues in ensuring that our BIPOC community is prioritized when it comes to addressing some of the inequities that we've seen in the history of this county. And now with the work that Councilmember Navarro did and having the racial equity and social justice, we have it as a part of the framework of everything that we do. It's great to see our African American Health Program, our Latino Health Initiative, Por Nuestra Salud y Bienestar, our Asian American Health Initiative, all coming together to focus on things that we know are incredibly important to us, including highlighting the importance of dental and maternity care, especially in light of what we're seeing now with the breastfeeding initiative and we're seeing with the lack of formula. And then our community partners, the consolidation services hubs who stepped up. Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you, including Graciela Rivera-Oven, who did an amazing job in spearheading this effort that then spread across the county. We have invested in people and places all of this time that we knew would benefit all of us. including our arts and culture community encompassing 500 cultural organizations, 2,000 artists and scholars, providing cultural diversity and economic vitality to this county. And while this budget has a modest increase to the arts, I know that additional investment is going to be needed to address the equitable funding needs of this vital community. I look forward to working with Susan Jenkins and my colleagues on the Education and Culture Committee and all of my colleagues to make sure that we can develop this incredible economic engine that is here in Montgomery County. So we've heard a lot about some of the physical structures, and so I'm not going to go into that in detail, but just want to thank folks for their support. Incredibly important Observation Drive and others that are there, the walk sheds, they're all incredibly important to us because without those, we lack the connectivity and lacks the support that's necessary. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank my good friend and partner on so many initiatives, Council President Albornoz. Sir, you have done a remarkable job in your leadership. You have led with your values. You have truly made sure that we don't forget what is important to all of us and who we serve. I want to thank my colleagues on the Education and Culture Committee, Councilmember Navarro and Councilmember Giwando. You know, I'm not sure there has ever been or will ever be as effective an Education and Culture Committee as this one. I mean, we can hope, and I certainly pray that my future colleagues will step up, but we have certainly set the high bar when it comes to Education and Culture Committees. So I've been referred to as the senior statesman. I think Councilmember Navarro has me beat by 6 months, but at the time I was the youngest African American to ever serve on the council. Councilmember Giwando trumped me with that one. But I hope that the diversity of this council will continue to trend in a direction that continues to reflect our community in both age, gender, and racial and ethnic makeups, as well as gender identity. It is incredibly important for us to see ourselves in our leaders. I want to close by thanking my staff. My staff has been there with me since day one. And that's unique. From the very first day, Daniela Moya-Gaber, Rose Taylor, Sharon Ledner, and Steve Goldstein, from the beginning to where we are today. And I'm so happy to be joined by new colleagues who came on, like Kristen Tribble, who does an amazing job, and Judy Stevenson, who we just brought on. But I want to tell you something, because the responsibilities that we have in terms of making sure that we solidify the future, we actually brought on Nicole Rodriguez-Hernandez, who then Marlene Michelson stole from me. It's okay. I don't take it personally. But it really is important for us to make sure that we're focusing on the future. And that's the reason why one of our former second runner-up for council member for a day, Angela Yu, who's in the audience today, came to intern with us and has been doing an amazing job. She's actually at Georgetown University. And guess what she's doing this summer, guys? She's interning to work with the State Department on anti-human trafficking policy internationally. And in an email, yes. And as in an email, she said that her work in working with our office helped to solidify her in understanding what it is that she wanted to do in the future in terms of her public service. Legacy, values. It is all incorporated not only in our budget, but how we live our lives and what it is that we do. And so as I reach the end of my watch as your county council member representing District 2, I just want to say thank you. Thank the voters for the opportunity to serve them. I hope that I have led my district well. I hope to my colleagues to please continue the great things that I built upon previous councils, and hope that you build on our work to continue to make Montgomery County, my home county, one of the best places to live, work, and play. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Friedson.
So here I am nodding along with colleagues, thinking everything that can be said has been said. And yet, I think colleagues would understand and not be surprised that I have quite a bit to say anyway. So, first of all, thank you to Council President Albornoz, to Joy Nerby, and your whole team for shepherding us through this budget cycle. It's been an adventure, but bumpy roads lead to beautiful places, and it certainly hasn't been easy, but you did make it look that way throughout this process. So thank you for that. Thank you to Marlene Michelson, to Craig Howard, and to the entire central staff team for doing yeoman's work and getting us across the finish line today, and for this team approach that we talked about earlier, which I really do think has made this process work a lot better for us on the dais, but more importantly for the residents who we are elected to serve. Every member of the team here, on all of our office staffs, on central staff, and throughout county government, executive branch as well, deserves a round of applause and probably a nap. So hopefully you get a chance to take one of those this afternoon and into this evening. And I just wanted to take a moment of personal privilege to thank my team, Cindy, Mary, Matt, Angela, and Angie. I have such an incredible team. District 1 is so well represented and served by you, and I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of your hard work. COVID-19 has shined a light on so many challenges in our community, exposing how many of our neighbors throughout the county are one paycheck away from missing a meal or being able to access the needed services and health care to live. But it's also showed us how we can adapt and change and partner beyond government to provide residents with the services and supports they need to not only survive, but to thrive. This budget helps us build a stronger foundation for future success and prosperity based on the lessons that we've learned over these past 2 incredibly challenging years. I am pleased to report that funding the fiscal year 2023 operating budget required no new taxes, recognizing that many of our residents are still struggling to make ends meet. When the county executive recommended an unprecedented $20 million withdrawal from the County Retiree Health Benefits Trust to fund current obligations, this council stepped up to unanimously reject it. Reaffirming our commitment to our retirees and to sound fiscal management was among my top priorities for this budget, and I was very proud to help lead this effort along with Council President Albornoz, GO Committee Chair Navarro, and all of our colleagues on this council. That major commitment, however, didn't prevent us from also fulfilling our promise to tackle our housing and climate crises simultaneously. In fact, we doubled down on our efforts with historic investments to provide record dollars to support our declarations that we've made to county residents. In response to our critical affordable housing needs, I was pleased to work with Councilmember Kramer to double our investment in what is now a nationally recognized revolving housing production fund, which will now reach $100 million and help us build nearly 6,000 new affordable units over the next 2 decades. The County Council also approved one-time funding of $40 million to support acquisition and preservation of at-risk, naturally occurring affordable housing, and added another $6 million to reach a total of $20 million to the county executive's recently created Housing Opportunity Fund, so that our nonprofit affordable housing providers can continue their work despite labor shortages, rising interest rates, and dramatically higher construction costs. We cannot stop the progress that we've been making on this crisis. I was also pleased to work with my Fed colleagues, Council Members Jawando and Reamer, to continue our efforts to support first-time home buyers by adding an additional $1 million in funding again this year to help more residents afford their first homes in Montgomery County. Thanks to the passage of the Montgomery County Buildings Now Act that Councilmember Hucker and I sponsored, this budget includes $18.6 million for the Montgomery County Green Bank, which will be leveraged with substantial private dollars to help businesses and residents retrofit their buildings to be more energy efficient. We must not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we also must increase our environmental resiliency for the damage that's already been done. I've been pushing for several years to double the funding for storm drain retrofit projects to address severe flooding in our neighborhoods. And I am pleased that this budget, as proposed by the executive and supported by the council, now fulfills this urgent need for our environment, for our safety, and for our quality of life. And as part of those quality of life measures as well, this budget also includes $4 million to maintain and expand our tree canopy and restores $1 million to patch and resurface roads. These are core government responsibilities, and we are living up to these obligations. The health of our local economy is always on my mind, especially as we rise to the challenge of recovering from this pandemic. This year's budget includes increased funding for the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, which is tasked with attracting and retaining employers to the county. I'm particularly pleased about the direct assistance for disproportionately impacted Black-owned businesses, additional support for Visit Montgomery to support our hard-hit hospitality and tourism sectors, and the inclusion of business development district grants to promote placemaking and marketing efforts in some of our county's existing and emerging commercial areas like North Bethesda and Friendship Heights. This capital budget includes critical transportation funding to advance the build-out of our bus rapid transit network, including on Rockville Pike and with the North Bethesda Transitway near the 270 spur. Despite the county executive's decision to delay the replacement of the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel, we fought hard, again, to make room for this $55 million project amidst a long list of priority capital projects, and were able to stave off 2.5 years from the proposed delays. We also moved the needle on the Tuckerman Lane sidewalk and bikeway project and made space for Summit Avenue Extended, a long-standing town of Kensington transportation priority, which will provide relief to traffic-burdened Connecticut Avenue. This budget also restores significant cuts to our parks and trails and includes critical funding for the exciting new park at the Women's Farm Market in Bethesda, which will bring to fruition a chief priority of the 2018 Bethesda Downtown Plan. Our nonprofit partners are the extra layers of mesh in our social safety net that prevents countless vulnerable residents from falling through the cracks. I am so pleased to work with colleagues to include a well-deserved 8% inflationary adjustment to help our community-based organizations meet the increased economic needs and service demands. The Nourishing Bethesda effort, which I have been proud to support from its inception, is one example of a partnership between faith, nonprofit, business, and community leaders that feeds hundreds and hundreds of families each and every Friday at the BCC Rescue Squad. This budget provides $250,000 for that effort to expand their food assistance model and include wraparound services. I'm also very grateful to colleagues on the Health and Human Services Committee for supporting my request to add $132,000 for community farm share in this budget to provide weekly fresh produce bags from local farms to the homes of 200 families in need as part of a collaboration with Linkages to Learning and Montgomery County Public Schools. Similarly, I am particularly pleased that we were able to add $50,000 to help nonprofit Village with their capacity building and support for our local-based organizations, and $100,000 to support a wider circle's critical efforts to help our residents return to the workforce. This budget recognizes the value of investing in our young people by inspiring them, by fostering their interests, and by equipping them with knowledge and life skills, by fully funding Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College's programmatic requests, and providing unprecedented investments in our students' mental health and well-being, especially including the $5.5 million to dramatically expand high school wellness centers led by Councilmember Navarro. After many years of stops and starts, the Noyes Library for Young Children has been finally funded, and thanks to our state partners and a significant county commitment, construction is now scheduled to begin this fiscal year. Colleagues and I were able to provide $1.8 million for Kid Museum to provide experiential hands-on learning and scientific discovery at the new flagship site at Bethesda Metro through an extraordinary partnership that they've developed with Montgomery County Public Schools. The council continues to work towards greater police accountability while simultaneously ensuring our first responders have the resources they need to keep our communities safe. While there is much work to be done to address recruitment and retention challenges in public safety, I am pleased that we raised police pay to be more competitive regionally, took steps to address the ongoing fairness issues within the pay scale, and thanks to Council Vice President Glass's proposal, expanded the cadet program. I'm also pleased that this budget includes $800,000 in nonprofit security grants for organizations at high risk of experiencing hate crimes. This builds on the successful initiative I worked with the executive branch to spearhead last year by adding an additional $100,000 more in funding to protect vulnerable facilities and the residents who occupy them on a daily basis. Finally, I'm very pleased that the Public Safety Committee and this council responded to my request to finally support the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad's calls to have equitable access to the central maintenance facility, like every other squad across the county, so they can continue to provide critical emergency services to our residents. This budget meets this moment, and it helps us build a strong foundation to meet the moments that follow. Thank you to all the Montgomery County residents who testified in multiple languages, at home, in person, in more accessible ways than we have ever been able to provide before. You made this process better, and the final budget that we have now preliminarily approved is better because of it. Our county will be stronger, our community will be stronger, and it's thanks to the active participation and engagement of our residents who have stepped up as part of this process. Thanks to you, thanks to colleagues, thanks to our staff, and I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, great job. Great job. I think you all framed this important budget so well, and I do want to reiterate my thanks to the executive branch for the partnership and the alliance. We are on the same team, and it really is deeply appreciated. So we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of our consent calendar. Can I get a motion to accept the consent calendar? That was moved by Council Vice President Glass, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. Any discussion regarding that consent calendar? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. So, great. Colleagues, just very quickly, a couple of quick announcements. One, there is a proclamation at 1 o'clock that I will be presenting regarding Older Americans Month. Of course, you're all welcome to join us, but we will formally begin our public hearings at 1:30. And thanks to the expedited work of everyone today, we no longer need to do items 13 or 14 because we've been able to wrap everything up this morning. So with that, colleagues, we are adjourned to recess, and I'll see everybody back this afternoon. Thank you all very much and great work.